Hey guys, this is another podcast. It is December 30th, 2016. We got Ronnie Pease on the podcast. Super interesting guy. I always say this, but when I have a guest on, but yeah, this guy's a interesting dude. Professional poker player slash, I guess a lot of poker players are travelers now. But anyways, welcome to the podcast, dude.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I guess we should start with the poker stuff. Um, what are you mostly playing nowadays?
Currently, mostly been staying in Las Vegas, so I've been playing live games over the past 2 to 3 years now. I've probably played the majority of my hours at 510 No Limit here in Las Vegas. I spent a brief time, 6 months or so, in Mexico, and I was playing some 500 Zoom, which is obviously for those that know it, an absurdly tough game. It was good to get into those Zoom pools and get some tougher competition. Really try to sharpen some things about my poker game. But yeah, I've been playing a lot of live no limits, so 2-5, 5-10, and occasionally 10-20 and higher, but mostly right in the middle.
How are you doing game selection? Do you game select at all or just go to the same place?
It's funny. I mean, within a 2-year period out here in Vegas, when I started playing 510, obviously, like anyone who has success in poker, I ran good at the start.
Right.
So game selection didn't really cross my mind as I was getting into it because 510 was so new to me. I started out at Bellagio because it's a smaller cap, so I assumed it was going to be, less tough than some of the uncapped games and some of the bigger games. And then I just moved to the Wynn, and I really just kind of fell in love with the room and the staff, and the game is uncapped, and I'm an absurd person when it comes to, thinking about the game, aggression, that kind of stuff. So once I got a little pumped up money-wise and I was able to play deep stack poker, I kind of fell in love with the insanity of all the options you have at your disposal. So game selection has not been my strongest suit, although recently I've kind of put more emphasis on it than I ever have, just because the games in Vegas are frankly just getting tougher by the day.
That's interesting. I would assume that there'd be a lot of really good games, or that just wouldn't be very tough.
It's the poker landscape has drastically changed over the last 5 to 10 years. Obviously, you were in the online poker scene well before me. I think I'm correct there. I think I really didn't even start playing seriously until 2010, 2011.
Yeah, I'm way before you, almost a decade or so.
Yeah, so, I mean, you saw in online poker where it went very quickly. I don't think that's something that is going to happen in the live scene in terms of just the sheer speed at which people got access to playing poker for a living. I mean, when Europe went through their recession, you just saw this absolute emergence of young, intelligent people flocking to poker because making anything around 20,000 euro a year or more was just so appealing to them because it was so hard. The prospects were so thin, for young college-age kids, that poker just kind of took off. And with Phil Galfond launching his site and all the sites that came before him, you just saw online poker get increasingly difficult. And like when I was playing 500 and 200 Zoom down in Mexico, it was incredibly good for like working on my game. But the games are, they're not unbeatable for everyone in the world, but largely they are becoming unbeatable with the rake and just the amount of regs.
I imagine there was a bit of a learning curve at first. Imagine you got your ass kicked quite a bit early on.
Yeah, I must say I probably ran very good in Mexico too.
Great.
I've certainly had my ups and downs like anyone. It's not all peaches in poker. But I definitely ran good when I first got there, because I was able to avoid like massive downswings or break even stretches. I will say that even though I've mentioned 500 Zoom because it's the most interesting game to people these days when they talk about Poker Stars, I started at like 200 Zoom and playing the 200 and 400 NL regular speed tables, and even 100. I actually think I grinded the first 50 to 100K hands at 100 no limits, so I was playing 50 cent a dollar. So the I got most of the terrible fundamentals and the learning out of the way before I reached a player pool where people were playing better than me. So that was smart and fortunate at the same time.
Right, I thought you jumped right into 500 Zoom.
No, that would have been an absolute disaster. I'd be the first to tell you that I would have gotten slaughtered. Like, just absolutely would have gotten manhandled. I went through a lot of studying and, looking at ranges and what I was doing versus the player pool, even when I was playing 100 Zoom when I first got there. So I think it was definitely at least a little credit to my planning, and a little credit to my lack of bankroll, too. I'm sure I was somewhat forced into the decision. If I had a ton of money, I probably would have been stupid enough to just jump into 500 Zoom.
Right.
But
most of your volume is live right now, right? Live cam.
yes. So getting back to like live poker, what I'm saying is that the game is at 2.5 and below. There's been a change, but I don't think you'll ever see 2.5 and below get, anything near online where people are making incredibly good decisions or playing with incredibly good strategies, even at low stakes. I just don't think that will ever happen in live poker, because the difference between those European grinders I'm talking about and the people that really made online poker tough and the live game is, it's really difficult to live in a place like Las Vegas and go to a casino every day and game select at low stakes and just like there just can't be this influx of people who know what they're doing, at an extremely high level in low stakes poker ever, because it's not a viable way to live,
right?
And it's not the amount of people doing it. I mean, there's so many recreational players. There's so many people that are, just gambling aficionados that are in town with their buddies or for a bachelor party or whatever it may be. So like 2.5 and below, you see very little change. But having gotten introduced to the 510 no limit game and playing some hours at 1020 at Bellagio and playing some green chip games during the summer, which for anyone who doesn't know is like 10 and a quarter or 25.50. You just see so many good players, and there's so many less fish. I don't think I'm saying that right in the English language, but
Close enough.
There's so few fish is what I was looking for.
Right.
And when you talk to people who have been in Vegas for 10 years or so, I mean, 25.50 used to run every day at the Bellagio. We're talking no limit hold'em, and the 1020 no limit game is having a hard time running daily now. I mean, so that at the higher stakes where people really were making really good money or really good hourlies, you see a lot more variance because of the influx of good players, and you see a lot less money to go around in terms of fishy money or dead money.
Right. So I have this I don't know, hypothesis or idea, and I guess you'd have better insight. I think it's interesting.
Hit me with it.
So when I see like young people, I feel like I could tell whether they play live or online by generally like how withered they look. Aside from you were like the outlier. Like you're pretty like healthy and like you live pretty like balanced life. Like you don't look like the opposite of withered. You look like healthy and good. But do you agree with that?
I think
that observation.
I think that obviously with any generalization, people will always jump on you if there's one person that doesn't fit the mold, but you're just trying to make a general statement. I think if I had to personally give insight into that, I would say a lot of your experience, correct me if I'm wrong, is at, the mid to high stakes tournament scene, like live scene.
Right. But I feel like I could also, I feel like it's even more accentuated if they grind live cash, like mid stakes live cash.
It may be so with someone who's trying to make their living at 1-2, 1-3, 2-5, which I don't blame those people for doing what they're doing or hold anything against them. But if you're going to be taking shots at the how people keep up their appearance, rather, as I'm struggling with English again. I would say, yeah, like when I see tournament players, like honestly, so many of them are just like, they came out from behind the computer screen and, they're just not as socially adjusted, and maybe it holds true for some grinders too. But when you really play live poker a lot, and the games that I play and the people that I meet, it's really just an eccentric group of people. Like, I don't really think of people who play live as withered. I just think of them as like, just there's a little, everyone has this unique personality where they're either super competitive or they just love like yakking it up at the table, and they love like the mental warfare aspect, and it just kind of they could be many of those things or one of those things, but I find it to be like a very unique group of people. Like out here, a lot of the people I know that grind are actually pretty well put together. They care about their appearance a lot, which is, I'm on the way low end of the spectrum there.
Right.
A lot of them are actually, pretty sharp. And you start playing in LA, and they just have like these really flamboyant styles, and everyone's, got this niche. Everyone's trying to be, like a Negreanu or, some type of flamboyant ESPN personality from the 90s. So I see a lot of different stuff, but
okay. So most of my experience is 2-5, I would guess. Yeah, most of my experience is like 2-5 and 1-2. So I guess not playing in the higher games kind of leads to that.
Yeah, there might be some people that are, and you play a lot on the East Coast, and I just got to say, sorry, I'm from the East Coast. Boston's in my heart. Connecticut's where I grew up, but I think that the people on the East Coast care a little less about their appearance in general. So when you talk about an East Coast grinder versus a West Coast grinder, there's a little more, grunge versus flash.
Yeah, and I guess I asked the question because you went through quite a big transformation physically in the past few years. I think you lost. How much weight have you lost in the past few years?
Honestly, I never, because when I was young, I was always in shape. I never really weighed myself then because I wasn't like, quite good enough to really care about trying to go pro in any sport or anything. But I never really weighed myself when I got really fat either. It's just one day I saw a picture of myself sitting at the poker table, and I was like, holy crap. Like, I mean, it's not like I should have found it surprising, because I went from age 4, I think my dad put me on skates when I was like 3 years old. So like hockey, football, baseball, golf were my life until I was 19, 20 years old. And then it just came to a crashing halt. And like living the online poker lifestyle was, magnified by the fact that I was living at a college and not going to school. So like I would wake up, I lived with a buddy of mine who was on the UConn hockey team at the University of Connecticut, and I lived in off-campus housing. And I went to the school for 3 semesters prior to that, so I knew a bunch of people there. I'm from Connecticut. I know a lot of people coming in, coming up to visit. I would get up at whatever time I rolled out of bed. I would grind, sit and goes or MTTs on PokerStars, and I would finish up my session. I would be eating takeout during the session, then I would go to the bar, and that would happen like 5 nights a week, 6 nights a week. And that kind of lifestyle catches up with you quick. I mean, when we met, yeah, I have no idea how much I weighed to answer your actual question, but I've probably lost 20 to 30 pounds. and there's been a lot of shifting of weight as well during the time since we met to now.
Right. And did you just have like one moment where you're like, you seen that picture and you're like, fuck, I gotta change? And
Yeah, I mean, it was an oh shit moment. Like, I mean, it wasn't really a moment. I mean, that lifestyle continued for a while. I just, at some point you just kind of look and feel unhealthy. And, to anyone out there who's, either was in shape at one point like I was and then let go, or, just feels like they need to make a change. I mean, it's definitely something that it wore on me physically and emotionally. Not like I wasn't like, I've never been the type of person that's not comfortable in my own skin, but like emotionally, I mean, I couldn't play as many hours. I wasn't as sharp. I was drinking too often, so it would throw off my mental state. Mood swings, just because of drinking and eating shitty is definitely a real thing. So I think that part of it was the most important aspect to me. Like, I definitely have not, started working out vigorously or doing anything, crazy. I got to a point where I was like, I need to not be a slob, and I need to like monitor what I'm putting into my body so that I can live like a normal person again.
right, what did you start eating? What was your diet like?
Well, obviously, like the college days were bad.
Oh no, like when you decided to like
When I
lose
decided
weight.
to make a change.
Yeah.
Honestly, Vegas was really good for me, food wise, just because it's an absurd place coming from, a suburb on the East Coast, and that's not to say the East Coast doesn't have good food, but like Glastonbury, Connecticut is Glastonbury, Connecticut, and it just has, what it has. There's not like it's not a very diverse place. There's not a ton of culture in Glastonbury, Connecticut.
It's a lot of sub shops, I imagine.
Yeah, there's a ton of sub shops. There's like, when people want to get Mexican, they go to Chipotle. When people want to get, Chinese food, they get the most American China. I ate more General Tso's chicken than you could ever imagine, and I've never seen that in like a really, traditional Chinese restaurant out here. But I guess I would say I started by cutting out. So sandwiches was a big thing for me. I used to eat a lot of sandwiches. I mean, a sandwich is a perfect meal, so it kind of pains me to, be saying that that's what helped me to get away. But I started watching, just what I was taking in. A lot less bread, a lot less, wheat in general, less pasta, less. Tried to do smaller portions. I don't know how effectively I actually do that, but tried to eat less food more times a day just to kind of speed up the metabolism a little bit. But mostly it was just getting more vegetables and more stuff other than meat and bread into my diet and
Meat,
kind
bread,
of
and
branching
cheese.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It was getting away from that that ham sandwich mentality and getting a broader spectrum of food.
Right. Yeah, I think it took me a really long time to learn or make the connection between what I'm eating and performance at the table.
Yeah, and in life, like I actually had another like not to bounce completely around, but this is somewhat related, especially
That's
for
part of the
poker players.
podcast.
That's the way it goes. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I hear this is definitely home for me then. But I was recently talking to someone about sleep schedule because obviously poker players, as much or more so than anyone, just end up in these absurdly weird sleep schedules from time to time. I know, like when I started playing at the Win, I realized that during the week, a lot of the regs either wouldn't play or they wouldn't stick it out or they wouldn't play shorthanded. So I started going to the Win to start my session between like 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. And you can imagine when your workday, quote unquote, starts at 10 p.m. or 1 a.m.,
Right.
what that does to your sleep schedule. And it really just affects my mood. Like, I really enjoy it, and if games are good and I have to do it for a little while, I will be on a completely backward schedule. But when I wake up and it's dark out and I'm like getting ready and trying to do stuff, trying to convince myself to work out, or trying to convince myself to go grocery shopping, and it's like 5:30 and the sun's going down, it just messes with my whole like chi throughout
Right.
the day. Whereas when I wake up in the morning, I feel definitely more energetic, like 100% more energetic. When you see sunlight, first thing you wake up, and then that kind of the same things were what I started noticing once I started paying attention to diet. It was very similar, like when I
I
was.
have to stop you because you used the word chi, and I'm wondering if you just threw it out there or if you believe in chi or what's up with that.
Well, that's a shout out to Gary Popcorn, who I'll try to get to listen to this podcast. But one of my buddies definitely is very involved in it, and there's a lot of jokes that go around about it. But I don't personally have any real thoughts on it one way or another. So sorry to disappoint, but
Okay.
yeah, it's
I
just
was going to ask you what it is because I hear the word thrown around and I just like, I get.
I mean, I kind of think of it, and this is going to be really corny, but also, fun for people who grew up watching Adam Sandler movies in the 90s. I think of it as like your happy place. you just kind of, you just kind of fucking happy. Like, you're just kind of centered. Things are going all right. I mean, I have no idea what, I'm sure it has, does it come from, Asian medicine, religion, that kind of thing?
I
I'm
think
sure there's some Asian background
I
to
think
it,
it
or
has something to
Buddhist.
do with like, it definitely comes from that area. I think it has something to do with like energy or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. The actual, people who are talking about chi are definitely talking about energy. I think that there's a lot of merit to the idea. I don't know anything about, what they actually believe in, or what they actually believe controls someone's energy or whatnot. But I think that, in a very broad, uneducated sense on the topic, I think that your mood and your energy have a lot to do with, how you feel and how you act as a person.
Yeah, I had Evan Jarvis on, Grips. I don't know if you've heard of him,
Maybe.
but he's into like a bunch of like pretty fringe kind of weird stuff. Um, and it was a really interesting conversation. And he kind of brings up this stuff, and it's like, it's really interesting because there's just so much even people who are really experienced don't know. I spent a lot of time trying to understand these things. And there's so much that I don't know. And there's a lot of ideas like chi and like I don't know, I keep hearing I don't know. Like I talked to this life coach once and he told me that he could just touch a girl and like make her orgasm or something. And
What a stud.
right. And
That's like that. I mean, I'm just going to keep throwing out 90s movies, but that's like that whole American Pie thing when Finch is trying to get ready for Stifler's mom, and he's just doing all sorts of tantric and like
right.
talking about 24-hour orgasms and whatnot. That's some next level shit right there.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring up Happy Gilmore. This is like one of my favorite movies of all time. Or at least used to be. I watched it like 100 times or something.
Yeah, my brother's legitimately seen that movie over 100 times. I got to be up there with him. We used to throw it on in the car. My mom used to have one of those VCR mobiles just to like shut us up when we'd go for car rides. And yeah, we've seen Happy Gilmore a lot.
Right. So what I don't mind is I believe that when my well, I guess he's not my coach, but when he does it, that this actually happens and that he's not bullshitting. But what I don't believe necessarily is like his explanation. Like he talks about like he's able to concentrate his energy and flow it and like direct it throughout her body or something like that. And
Yeah, I mean, I'm very skeptical of pretty much anything that sounds like that, but I'm also very intrigued by things like that. So, I mean, living out here in Vegas, and especially in my actual poker friends group out here, there's a lot of like I said, eccentric people and eccentric ideas and things that people are into. And I listen to some of the stuff that they talk about. And, there was a lot of my friends did ayahuasca recently, and they were talking about, with the whole, they had a shaman and everything, or maybe shaman's not the word, but the guy came from Peru to Vegas to, lead the ritual, and they did this 8-hour thing. And I mean, that stuff's super intriguing to me, but whenever someone's talking about, controlling energy or, all this, universal movement stuff, I don't necessarily ever buy it, but I'm always intrigued to hear what they're saying and why they think they're capable of something. And then I kind of just make my own, create my own opinion of what I think of what they're talking about and how much of it is just a load of shit and how much of it is
Right.
something that's viable.
Right.
But
I
it's
believe
always interesting to talk to people who think like that.
I believe that it happens. I just don't believe in like the explanation that they give. So, for example, Evan was into Tai Chi push hands, which is, if you watch some videos on Tai Chi push hands, it's like pretty hilarious. It's like the instructor barely touches people. Imagine you running at your martial arts instructor. You're running full force, and then he just barely puts his hand on you, and you just fly in the other direction. Imagine like 10 people running at him like that.
It's like those old Asian action films, man.
Yeah, and I don't disbelieve. I don't think any of them are faking it or anything like that. But I don't believe in their explanation of push, like pulsating energy through everyone. It's the same argument that my life coach guy is giving. Like the
Yeah.
pulsating energy and all that. And it's interesting because there was this Tai Chi push hands instructor, and he got challenged by like an actual fighter.
Right.
And he just absolutely got his ass kicked, and like none of the stuff worked.
Yeah. I mean, all the credit in the world to the guy for, throwing people around with his energy and whatnot. But if I was going to decide between learning from someone who was telling me they were using their energy to, like, finger tap someone and throw them across the room versus, like, Conor McGregor, I'd probably train with McGregor and take my chances.
Right.
That's just kind of the way I'm very open to hear anything and anyone. Like, I mean, obviously you have this guy on, you're the same way, but it's definitely one of those things where you're going to have to convince me, or I'm going to just, agree to consider your viewpoint and then go on thinking the way I thought beforehand.
Right. Well, I think it's an interesting practice, and probably one that brings a lot of happiness. It has to do with like a lot of focusing on your body and kind of getting out of your mind, and it's a meditative kind of martial art. So I think it's... Are you still there? Our sound went out. Check.
I am. I was pouring a glass of water, so I was
Hit the
muted.
mute. Yeah.
Sorry, I should have asked if that jacks with the sound.
Yeah, I just sometimes calls get dropped. It's all good.
Good old Skype.
Yeah. I forgot what I was saying.
You were talking about the meditation aspect of the martial arts.
Oh yeah, of like Tai Chi. So I think it's really beneficial in that regard. My hypothesis is just that if two people really believe that something is happening, that it's just gonna happen. Like if two people really believe that, when like I touch you, you get an orgasm. Like if we're both really buying into that, not you, but
Yeah, I mean, I know
partner.
what you mean. I mean, you never know. You can give it a shot next time you're in Vegas.
You gotta you gotta buy into it though. You gotta do the training.
Yeah, I mean, if two people are like sitting there in a room for 30 minutes trying to build up their energy for this one touch orgasm, and they both completely buy into it with every ounce of their being, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me that it's possible for it to happen. But I mean, you can't, like, that guy can't go touch a girl on the street and then, like, make her come. I mean, that's just not gonna happen.
Right, and the Tai Chi guy can't fight a real fighter.
Right. You put that Tai Chi guy in the room with McGregor's gonna beat his face in. I mean, there's just some things I know about life, and until they're disproven, that's just gonna be the way I think. But it is, like I keep saying, it's always super interesting to hear, people talk about things that they're passionate about, or things that are very different from what most people think about life, or just what you see and experience in day-to-day life. So it's always really fun to explore these topics. But yeah, I mean, I am definitely one of those people who I'll definitely give everyone their chance, to explain something to me, or tell me about whatever they're passionate about. But I'm not shy about formulating my own opinion about it after they're done.
Right. Yeah, I don't even mean to denigrate the Tai Chi practice. I think it's a great thing for someone to do. It's cool, but I just don't like the explanations afterwards and trying to intellectualize it. I'm not sure where we tangented from. I don't know how we got here.
Well, we went from, poker to diet to waking up, and then all of a sudden we got onto, the chi. I brought out the word chi, and then we went into the whole tangent about spiritual being.
Right. Solid memory. All right. So a question I want to ask, and this is a broad question, so start with whatever. What I think is interesting and what I kind of like about having poker player friends is it's pretty cool to see like their growth process. And so meeting you in 2012 versus meeting you in 2015, I think the difference is so stark. And what I think is so fascinating about it is you did it without reading any books or audiobooks or anything like that. And I don't know, it's a broad question, but can you break us down like this process? Where did it start? I don't know. I asked a shitty question, but try your best with it.
I can do it. No, you gotta always hold. I mean, I guess it's a good podcasting tip to, be honest when you're not as happy with your question as others. But I think it's a fine question. I think the gist is there's two things, for people who don't know me, and even someone as yourself who does know me well. You got to keep in mind is in 2012, I was 22 years old, and in 2015, 26. So I was 26. So I think it's part of it is natural, which is a very cop-out answer. So I'll definitely expand beyond that. But I think that's where you start is you meet a 22-year-old kid, and some people figure it out at 19, some figure it out at 22, but there's eventually this point in a young person's life where they go from, at least in mine and many of the people I know's cases, thinking they know everything, which was about 18, 19 for me.
I think I remember you explaining it kind of starting with breaking the safety net and moving out of Connecticut. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I think like at 18, 19 years old, I mean, my whole life, I grew up in, a really nice two-parent household where they broke their backs to make everything, as easy for me as possible. And I took full advantage of that. Great school system, played a lot of sports, did a lot of things, with friends. And it's really hard for a child and an adolescent to have perspective on that. And so definitely there was a lot of pent up, I don't want to call it arrogance, but there was definitely a cockiness about, the way I went into conversations with people or into, attacking problems or tasks, whether it be in school or in sports or in life. So at 22 years old, I was just kind of realizing, maybe I don't have it all figured out, but I'm sure when you met me, I mean, I was new into poker and there was still a lot of that bravado. There was still a lot of that. I've always been a very boisterous personality, and that hasn't changed too much. But I think I thought, I was just so good at something because when you pick up something that's completely new to you and you have this crazy idea like I might be able to make my living playing a card game, and then you go out and do it and you have like $50,000 in your box at Foxwoods and your friends are, racking up hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, it's hard to have perspective in that moment,
Right.
And
I didn't view you as cocky back then. And I hate this word, but I just feel like there was a huge, from my perspective, a huge growth in intelligence in that like 3 or 4 year period.
yeah, well, I think that that's fair and expected. I think the biggest thing, like you said, moving away was so I grew up. For people who don't know, I grew up in Connecticut. Went to school in Connecticut, dropped out of school in Connecticut, and then started playing poker in Connecticut. So my whole life was kind of, in the Northeast, and like I said, ton of friends and family around there that I was very close with, and made keeping life the way it was very easy for me. And it's very hard to grow when everything's the same. That's an opinion of mine. That's not a fact or anything. But as it turns out, when I moved away and when I came to Vegas, I knew one person. His name is Kevin Colenso. And we weren't even that close. I mean, we met through Pete Campo and Dave Stefanski at Foxwoods. And, they were boys with Kevin. And he was like the only person whose name I knew that lived in Las Vegas. So I came out here completely alone and, just ready to conquer the world and, fell flat on my face 2 or 3 times in the first 2 or 3 years and got back up, dusted off and just, I've always had that bullish mentality where I'm certainly not going to let adversity make me shy away from anything. If anything, it's going to motivate me. But what it did in the process was just change the way I had no lifelines. I had nothing to really, nothing to fall back on, except for my own ability to grow as a person. And the irony about that, about having no one and relying completely on yourself, is that you naturally rely on other people around you. It just doesn't necessarily come in a nurturing way that it would with family and friends. It was just, I was out in the world, I was out here in Las Vegas, and I had to learn from older poker players how to approach games or manage money or, do whatever skills I picked up in the 4 to 5 years between when we met and when we had that conversation. A lot of the growth was due to life experience. And I think that,
So I have to cut you off because I think this is a really important aspect. This idea of, so I think a lot of people view change or they're trying to change in a situation where they're just really comfortable in. Like the situation you were in, Connecticut, like
right.
it's really hard to change when you're comfortable and like you just sit back and do nothing. And
it's really, really difficult to change. Like most of the people I go back and see, there's just really not much different about them or their lives, and that's not a problem. And I'm not, saying anything negative about it, but it's hard to change when you're in one place and one culture and one life. Like,
yeah, environment's so important. Like I was talking to a buddy of mine on a podcast, Rory, and he was talking about discipline, and he's one of the most disciplined people I know. And he was telling the story about how he wasn't disciplined at all as a kid, and his parents constantly told him like, shape up, you got to learn discipline, and he never did. But eventually he got a job where if he wasn't disciplined, he'd just be fired. Like he wasn't going to be able to compete. And so he learned discipline, and now he's just like most disciplined one of the most disciplined guys I know.
Yeah, I mean that's just kind of how people grow. I mean, you talk to anyone at 22, then 28, then 35 years old, and they're just gonna. I mean, if they haven't grown as a person or they haven't, become more intelligent, I mean that's a very broad way to talk about people. I've actually had that conversation with a good buddy of mine out here. How hard it is to judge, or quantitate. I don't know if that's a word, but
Quantitate is a word, but I think
quantify.
Yeah.
How smart someone is, because we see so many people out here. Like, I mean, obviously, it's very easy to pick someone like the person who's valedictorian in your class, and then the person who's exceptionally good at math or sciences. I mean, those people are smart, and I would never take that away from them. But a lot of those people are a lot of people who are very brilliant in like these book smart ways tend to be limited in other areas, in social aspects, in if they're brilliant writer, a lot of them are very terrible at math, this, that, and the other. So it's really hard to like decide how intelligent someone is. But I think that people, as they get out of their comfort zone, as they experience different places, different cultures, and different people, they're just more apt to grow. And whatever that growth may be, whether it's becoming, better with the English language, or whether it's just becoming incredibly useful in social situations, or anything on the broadest spectrum of, intelligence and growth, I think that getting out of whatever situation you're most used to and getting into situations that make you uncomfortable is the fastest way to grow in almost anything.
Yeah, and this is something I've struggled with a lot, and even recently. So late 2015, my granddad died, and I decided to move in with my grandmother for like 6-8 months or something of 2016.
Okay.
So I'm living there. I have like rent-free, no bills, no like responsibilities or anything like that really. And that whole year, like I was struggling to change, being upset because I like want to learn and push like I always do, like I typically do. And I just didn't have any drive or any energy to do it. Like I spent most of that time bitching about doing nothing or playing like board games with my buddies or playing chess or League of Legends or something.
Right.
And as soon as I moved out of that situation, because it kind of just wasn't working for any of us, like it's just back to normal, like completely back to normal, just like the way I'm used to.
Yeah, it's really tough, and that's something that I struggle with the most is balancing personal and ties to family, ties to friends that I truly care about. Trying to balance managing those relationships in a way that they merit, meaning the people that give me a reason to care deeply about them, they deserve something in return, and that's harder to do the further away I get, and the more things that I'm doing away from home and outside of those people's lives. And then balancing personal happiness. So if I stayed in my parents' house every day of my life for the next 20 years, my close family and friends there would, well, actually, they'd probably kill me. But if I lived in a house down the street and then, saw them on, was able to do all the things that I want to do, as a brother, a son, a friend, then that would be very good for those relationships in a way. But I mean, I would struggle to have any happiness or growth in my own life. And then if I stay away forever, then I never really get to do anything worthwhile for my friends and family. So that part of it is definitely a struggle. I find that pursuing growth, almost just pursuing whatever it is that you're really, really desiring when you're at a young age is just very good. I mean, it sucks to not be able to be as close with the people that you love. Um, specifically friends and family that are back home for me. But I think that, the more opportunity you have to push and grow and set up a life, the more, I think it's like almost game theory optimal, but it sucks because, life moves fast and the more you deal with loss, the more omnipresent that shrinking, hourglass becomes, that just the sand is only running in one direction and, you're missing out on time with these people or, things like that. So I think that balance is super key, and that's the hardest thing for me. Like, that's the one thing that I have come nowhere close to figuring out, but it seems to be an essential part of life.
Right. I think, have you found growth kind of alienate you from like friends or family members who aren't interested in that at all?
It's yes would be the easy answer. I do, but that's like, I mean, I don't think that you meant it this way, but I think it sounds kind of arrogant if you're just like, well, I've outgrown my friends or my growth is limiting my family's ability to understand me. But in very many senses, yes. The more, so for instance, when you live at home with a sibling for a long time, and you go through everything, in the same environment, you have the same general influences in your life and that kind of stuff. You see things, one way, and then, so my brother's like 7 years younger than me, and I noticed that like when I come home, or a lot of the things that we used to see eye to eye on, or just things that we cared about, kind of the same amount, just change and fluctuate, and like it definitely has an effect. It definitely changes the way you interact. It changes, what influence you may have on that person's life or that person may have on your life, because when you care about someone deeply and they have differing views, hopefully both parties stop and think about the other person's point of view. So that aspect of it is interesting, but as far as like outgrowing people, I mean, I'm certainly not gonna throw anyone under the bus or call anyone out, because the greatest examples are people that I was either once close friends with or remain close friends with. But outside of my family, I definitely have seen, with some friends, that it's just really, really hard for us to even relate to each other or talk to each other about anything of importance or meaning, because they're still stuck, going to the same bar and, doing the same thing every single day of their life. And they just have no view of the world outside of that Glastonbury bubble. And you just run out of things. There's like no common ground unless you talk about like high school hockey and how fun that was or something.
Right. Yeah, I guess I have friends and family members who is like that, but it's just this, like, you just can't have any of those conversations that you kind of enjoy having
Right.
with other people. But
like with my brother, it's cool because he's 20 or about to be 20 or about to be 21. He's gonna kill me when he listens to this, but he's about to turn 21. But so with him, it's like him and I are just both growing at rapid paces, and we're just at different parts of our development as humans, So like, it's cool because I have some influence on him, and he has influence on me. Like I'm able to realize, things that were a part of me when I was his age, and try to get him to keep the things that are good and change the things that are bad. And then like he'll be able to, keep a lot of things culturally and things that, like, after I just completely lost touch with music, for example. Like I mean, I'm like every other person that leaves college. Like, I just didn't have any way to get new music into my life because I had different things that I was doing. And Kenny's just constantly, telling me to listen to this guy or look this up and listen to this band, and that kind of stuff is fun. So with him, it's like a lot of good growth and a lot of positive things. I just notice a drastic difference because I used to be, him in his environment at 20, and now I'm me at 27. And so when we talk, there's a lot of differences, but it's good and it's healthy. But some of my friends, man, I mean, they're my age. It's way different with them. And some of them are more acquaintances than friends. A lot of my closest friends are, out doing great things, or we don't skip a beat. But some of these guys, I mean, their lives are so much different from mine, and there's just not really much to talk about or much perspective on, the world outside of where we grew up.
Right. I've been trying to think about, although it's not a problem I run into that often, but like what type of people not to allow in your life. And I kind of hate when I hear people make the argument like of only having successful people in your life. Like you're the average of your 5 friends, so only hang out with people who are super successful.
Sounds like a clickbait Facebook ad.
Yeah, I see it a lot. And
I mean, that's just total garbage. Like, those kind of people are just so worried with, success and all the bad parts of the American dream, and, trying to hustle and bustle their way to whatever they can. But, I mean, there's some merit to stuff like that. I mean, you certainly want to pick up the habits of successful people and hardworking people. But, like, some of the simplest and, like, quote unquote least intelligent, which is insensitive but true in the, at the root of the word, people that I've come across, have just a great impact, whether it's on their community or on me as a person, or just, how I feel about. There's a lot more to life than just like, making $1. And if your goal is to make as many dollars as you can, then yeah, I mean, you should mimic people that do the same thing, and you should, try to figure out how to do it. But I think that the more diverse your friends group is, I mean, some people that I just like vehemently disagree with all the time and kind of don't even like what they stand for as people are still roots of growth and learning for me. I mean, I think diversity is one of the most important things.
so what I think is really interesting is that you did not use books for any of this. How many books have you read in the past 5 years?
How many books have I read in the past 5 years? Well, I read one book on the plane home about a month ago, and then I think I read Bobby Orr's biography about 2 years before that, and that's probably it.
Yeah, 2 books. And so what I think is interesting is that a lot of people feel the need to read books. At least I
Right.
see this around, like this is how I have to learn. Or you probably see it in poker.
A lot of people use literature to get cultured when they're not leaving their situation or when they're stuck in one place in
Right.
one life.
I mean, it's a good strategy if you don't have people to meet. It's just books are just not for some people. And I think that's totally fine. Just like there are some ways of thinking about the game of poker that are not for some people, and that's something that cost me like hundreds of thousands of dollars to realize. Literally, honestly, because I don't know if you've experienced this, but you would hear some ideas about the game, like just as an example, when GTO came out. When GTO first came out.
GTO, Game Theory Optimal.
Yeah. When that first came out, that made me hate poker. Because I'm like, not when it first came out, when it got more popularized. So this is about like 2, 3 years ago, it became more popularized in the tournament scene.
Was this because you just basically envisioned computers solving the game that you had spent so much time like looking at as a person, trying to figure out yourself?
No, it was because the way I enjoyed playing the game was um, watching what people do, adjusting from there, exploiting them. And the way I view GTO is figure out what the best strategy is in this spot, ignore the other person, what he's doing, and just play your range. And I'm like, this is what every good player is doing. I have to do that. So therefore, so I tried to play like that, and I just absolutely hated it. It was miserable.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely changed the game.
Like,
It's funny because I mean it's so important to poker right now, but it's something that we're not close to being able to achieve, in the pure sense, and it's not exceptionally applicable in most games. So if you're playing like 50, 100 PLO with Galfon, Sauce, a couple of the Scandies, then you need to have a really damn good idea of what people think is GTO right now. And you need to know why they think that and when it may or may not be good to deviate from it. But when you're playing like 5-10 no limit in a 9-handed game live, and most of the pros don't even have a clue what that is or aren't playing anywhere near GTO strategies, um, it's just a baseline. Like at that point, it's just not. There's still so much exploitation in the game, especially live, that I really think you're safe there with having to, just completely bemoan the demise of exploitative play in poker. But I see what you're saying.
right. So I what when I made the change and started to like poker again was when I started to care more about the ideas and principles behind GTO.
Right.
Like, so one of the principles is board coverage, which I think is really interesting to think about in terms of like exploiting people who don't have board coverage or making sure your range has that board coverage. Like, I think that's really interesting because it doesn't necessitate ignoring the other person, how they're playing. It's just about creating like a good strategy. Um, Another one is like obvious, like range advantage. I think is really interesting. Like range flexibility, I think is really interesting, which nobody probably uses that word. Probably just made it up. But
I like it.
yeah,
Am I allowed? Are you patenting it or trademark or?
no, definitely not. I didn't know you could do that. If that's a thing.
Yeah, I really enjoy like the thing that's made learning fun again for me as I try to stay motivated in the poker scene, and kind of crawl back up from the bottom here again as I so often put myself in these situations. But I really think that board coverage is cool, like it's huge. I mean, obviously it's something that good players have thought about for a long time, but never in the depth that you've seen the last year to year and a half to 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I find leading spots and multi-way play and bet sizing. Like bet sizing has always been, that's kind of been like my favorite thing to nerd out about in poker. And I have a friend here who
We had an interesting discussion in the WSOP main event where you want to like 5x pot or something. I remember.
I think I did.
Right. Yeah, I think you did. I don't remember the hand though.
There were a couple of. There was one bluff and one. There was actually a spot. Go over it quickly
you had the
for the
nuts or
fans.
something. Yeah. Go ahead.
I opened 2 nines like in early position at a 9-handed World Series of Poker main event table. The big guy, The 10K buy-in. All these people ponied up $10,000 of someone else's money. A couple people at the
Someone
table,
else's money.
all the pros, and then a bunch of people, a couple people at the table ponied up their own money because they're like businessmen and they got other stuff to do in their lives. And I get called by, some crazy European who convinced someone to pay for his buy-in. And one other guy who I don't remember. And then, like, the big blind was this guy who definitely, was a recreational player, put up his 10K and, was there having a party, or maybe he won a satellite. Who knows? The flop comes down ace 9-9 rainbow, I believe. Could have been a flush draw, but probably rainbow. And I bet like 1/3 pot into it when it checked me as the original raiser. I just knew that the European kid was going to float super wide, and the guy in the big blind was going to make enough mistakes that I didn't feel like checking here when I had a chance to win like a massive pot. And something lower than a 9 came on the turn, and I think it checked through. And then the old ace ball came on the river, and our good friend, the businessman who put up his own 10K, leads out for whatever bet he let out for, and we were like 60,000 chips deep at like 50, 100, or 100, 200 or something. And I didn't know what the hell to do.
Right. So I imagine the bet size on the river is probably like 1,500 into like 2,500, or 2K into 2,500.
Yeah, I just remember shove was like, I think shove was like 10 pots or around there. So
Right.
like if I went all in, I was effective, or I mean he was effective. I was, that was the other part of it that was interesting because he's the type of guy that's probably never going to fold a full house for any reasonable bet in any situation. But, this isn't the 200 nightly at the bike. This is, he came to Las Vegas and he's got 60,000 chips in the big guy. So I thought that the fact that he was going to be all in might hurt my chances of getting called. But yeah, just an absurd spot. I mean, embarrassment of riches spot. But I think, like, I talked about that hand with tons of people, just because I found it so unique and interesting. And so, like, let's say the pot was 6K or whatever. Let's assume it was 6K and we were 60 effective. Like, he bet, 2 into 3. I would call 2. It would be 7 or 6 or something. I think a lot of people said, I'll make it like 50. A lot of people said make it like 15. And then a few people said make it like 32.
Yeah, 32 feels right.
And I just remember sitting there, like, I tanked for like maybe 30 seconds, 40 seconds, which for me is an eternity.
Right.
At a live table. I just do not like taking time unless I'm actually grinding my gears about something other than, what color hat the guy's got on. But yeah, I think I made it like 30, and he just put it in, and I was like, oh, I should have shoved. Like, the guy didn't even know what happened. Like, I turned over my hand, and he's like, yeah, I got a full house too. What do you? And then he didn't even know what was going on. I was so.
Right. Well, yeah. I'm interested in your thoughts. I think me, you, and James were the first people. We discussed it immediately after, like on that break.
Right, we went to dinner somewhere.
Yeah, all you can eat sushi or something. Right, and I think we kind of all agreed that betting a size that gets a fold any percentage of the time just really sucks.
Yeah, it's well, we just decided that it's really hard to know if he's folding like 5%, 2%, 10%, or the average player that looks like that man looked in the main event.
Right.
So we decided that, I mean, if you have a really large skill edge really early in this tournament, that if he folds, like, mathematically, obviously, if you put in 30 and you put in 60, I mean, you're going to win 100% of the time. The guy never has aces. So mathematically, there's an equation that says X percent of the time, if he folds, that's break even. That makes you indifferent between betting, 30 and 60 or whatever. But we decided that even if we thought the fold was going to be slightly less than the break even point, that given the dynamics of the tournament and how just really, really bad in the moment early in that tournament it is to miss value in that spot is catastrophic. So we thought that you should err on the side of caution when it came to getting to the top of where you thought you could size it.
Have you changed your mind on that, or have you heard good counter arguments to that?
No, I don't think that conceptually anyone disagrees with that. I mean, it's just really like many of the outlier poker scenarios that always happen with someone who is, less skilled and just more unpredictable. You're purely guessing, and everyone's purely guessing. So, I have some friends that think he was folding, the average person, his spot was folding 2% of the time, and I have friends that think 2 and all in, and I have friends that think, the average person's folding 30% of the time. And, that's whatever. We just have to make, our best guesses in those spots. But I think conceptually, no one would argue with what we were talking about. I think that if you're talking about a little bit of chip EV lost, but you're always going to get called with the smaller sizing you pick, then I think that it's very clearly the best play.
And okay, remind me to get back to calling the clock, because I think that's interesting discussion. And next time I play live, I just want to snap call clock after 60 seconds every time on everyone, which would not make me many
I call
friends.
the clock a lot, but it's always at showdown.
What was I going to say? Oh, so I was talking about your growth and development. And so the point I was making is that if you don't like books, you don't have to read books. There's nothing all that special about books. If you break them down strategically, it's kind of...
let's be honest. Books are a great source of information. No one's arguing that, and most people wouldn't. There's certainly, when you're trying to become a dentist and you have to learn, a myriad of science topics, it's probably most efficient to learn from a book, if not the best option in general. But there's a lot of ways to learn, and there's a lot of ways to grow, and there's a lot of kind of gets back to the whole conversation I was having with my friend Brad. There's a lot of ways to be smart or to be intelligent. There's a lot of ways to make yourself, better all around, as not necessarily, spiritually as a person, but just, as an asset, whether it's an asset to yourself, an asset to your company, an asset to your friends. And books are a very small part of that. I mean, they're a viable part of that, but they're a small part of that. I've honestly made...
For me, they're a big part of it.
Right.
But I love books, though, is the thing.
Yeah. I mean, you and I have talked about that. I've been seeking out, some potential things to read. I just read The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho.
Oh, that's a fun one.
That's the book I read on the way home. And
what did you think?
Oh, I thought it was fantastic. I mean, when I was growing up, I loved reading books. I loved, reading the ones that interested me in class. I was never very good at doing stuff that I didn't enjoy. So the ones I didn't enjoy, I was not good at. I used to have to cheat off people or make up my own outlandish things when doing assignments. But yeah, I mean, I enjoy books. It's just the way that I've spent my time, and the way, I mean, a lot of my downtime right now is spent studying poker. And I mean, books are like archaic when it comes to poker. There's no book out there that's going to make me, at this point in my career, I don't think, a significantly better poker player.
Right.
So a lot of it has to do with circumstance. If I was trying to get a more broad knowledge of, say history or mathematics or sciences, say I went back to school or something, there would definitely be, a lot of book work involved. And it would be something that, if that's what I wanted to do in that time, that would be something I'd be fired up to read about. But yeah, it's just as it happens with me. And as it has happened over the last 3 or 4 years, like you said, I think your question was about the last 5 years, and I gave you the two ball for number of books I'd read.
Right.
But man, it's just like when I was in Mexico, and I'm talking to young engineering students, old men that have never left their business and never left their town. People who haven't seen that, like, it's very common. This was like super weird to me, but it's very common in Mexico for, like, say someone from Oaxaca, which is a region of, I believe, like the middle eastern part of Mexico, who moved to like Tijuana and started a family, to like not see their parents for multiple years, decades even.
What? Why?
And so, like, talking to someone, I don't know, just like culturally, it's kind of like the anti-Italian. They're just, I don't, I'm not speaking for all of the Mexican people, but I met like many people in Tijuana who, whether it's, I think a lot of it has to do with poverty. I think a lot of it has to do with opportunity. But that's a choice that they obviously make, knowing that they won't be able to afford to visit or like bring back their grandkids often and stuff like that. I mean, that's crazy to me. Like, I can't imagine. I mean, my parents, if you had my parents on here and asked them how often they think I should be home, or how often, if they're satisfied with how often I visit home, I mean, they'd go ballistic. They'd be like telling you that I don't come home enough, I don't call enough, I don't text enough. And like this guy that was driving me around, he was like taxi guy that, hooked up with a lot of the poker players so that he had like a steady business. He hadn't seen his parents for 12 years. He has 3 or 4 kids. And like they hadn't seen their grandparents for like 6 years. So like they even went to see the grandparents without him.
Huh.
It's just, it's wild. But I mean, to get back on topic, I'm very good at getting away from the topic, but it's just, you speak to, when you interact with human beings, you're able to glean so much from them. Like, everyone has Glastonbury, Connecticut, but it's different. So like what I mean is, everyone I speak to has this like 18 to 20 year period of their life where they grew up somewhere, or they grew up in maybe a myriad of places, but they have these experiences. And then they have the experience of what they're doing for a job, which is almost always significantly different from what I do for a living. And then they have, their core values and what they care the most about. And often the things that they care the most about are much different than the things that you or I care most about. So you just get this wealth of information. And I feel like being socially adjusted, or being socially capable, for lack of a better term, is a strong suit of mine. And I think that when you are able to talk to people and understand what they're best at, or understand what they're good at and what they're not, or what they know what they're talking about when they speak.
There's a great Emerson quote, which you would know if you read books. is if in every man I meet, he's like in my walks, and every man I meet, he is my superior in some way, and in that I learn from him.
Yeah, I mean, that is exactly what I'm trying to get at. Man, books are smart, man. I should start with this book thing.
Emerson is...
You know what my favorite author quote of all time is?
What is it?
I never let my schooling interfere with my education.
Oh, who is that? I remember that one.
Mark Twain, Connecticut.
Right. That was a good one.
Mark Twain's a homie. He was my favorite.
Right. And what's interesting is that the same thing you want in books is what you get in conversation.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a problem with, I mean, this is going to be like so cliche and so Facebook clickbait, but I think it is a problem. The younger a person you talk to, like I'm, somewhat to significantly younger than you, at least in a poker sense or in a young people sense. I'm younger than you. My brother's younger than me, and some of my cousins are younger than him. And that's something that needs to be worked on, like the ability to converse and learn things from people, because you can mash in as many things as you want, to Google and Wikipedia, and you can come up with a myriad of information. And like I said, I've read 2 books in the last 5 years, but I mean, I've read thousands upon thousands of articles, and so I guess like it's kind of misleading to say that a lot of my learning hasn't come from reading, because it definitely has. But a lot of it is, instead of reading, textbooks and novels, I'm reading thoughts and opinion pieces on what's going on in the world, right now, or what I'm interested in, or maybe something that's happened in the past.
What
But you can only get so much information from that. You have to like talk to people. You have to figure out how other human brains work, and that's how we went from scratching our armpits to building buildings and flying planes, is interacting with each other and learning from each other.
Yeah, the one advantage conversation has is that a book, the person doesn't know you. The book wasn't written for you. Whereas in a conversation, the person can, if they're a good conversationalist, apply it to your situation and help you understand it better.
Yeah.
Like if you don't understand, you could say, "Hey, what do you mean?"
Yeah. Like, hey, I didn't go to 8 years at MIT. You need to like start from page 1 of the textbook with me. you
Or
can't you can't talk to me about calculus 8 before explaining the other
and
7
I'm
classes.
sure you've had situations where you've had a life situation and you explained it to your friend and they like imparted advice. And
Oh, absolutely.
and you cannot get that from a book. Exactly. You can't. I mean, you could get a book on, social anxiety or something like that if you have it, but it doesn't. It's not exactly tailored to your situation. You can't spell it
Right.
out.
It's not. I mean, my cousin just graduated after like millions of years of school with a psychology degree, and she wants to help children, or be a therapist of some sort. I mean, if you read a book on social anxiety, or if you go talk to my cousin, the outcomes are going to be very different. Because if that book's not geared towards exactly your problem and what you need, I mean, and it's not a strong message that you believe in, it's hopeless. Whereas when you talk to a person, I mean, at least they're in front of you. They can connect with how you're feeling about what they're saying. When you're ready to take in information, a person can figure out when someone's listening and engaged and willing to learn, and when someone needs to have their mood affected, or something else, before they'll even take in any information. So there's a lot of things that come from human interaction that are just very unique.
That's a pretty good point because you can read a book and just be not taking in any of the info and just be
I can't tell you how many Run It Once videos I've watched that I remember nothing from, just because of like mood or falling asleep. Like,
right.
I know my buddy Bicker says that, he says Run It Once is probably single-handedly responsible for, you know, people being great at poker, including us, but he can think of nothing better than to put one of those videos on to go to bed at night. Because if you're not in the mood to learn, I mean, it's just dull.
Right. Yeah, and conversations are, especially good conversations, are just more interesting and they're more memorable. You retain it more or better, in my opinion. I think.
yeah, I think cognitively there's something. I finally got a word right. There's something that really clicks when you have a conversation with someone. I can usually, if I learned something or if I heard something that I'd never heard before, I generally remember the source and maybe even why the conversation came about, or what spawned that line of thought. So
Right.
there's definitely a lot of good things, and that's something that's really interesting because I'm such a huge fan of culture, and I'm now an aspiring traveler. Is that it sucks that we can't communicate with everyone on Earth. Like that sucks. Like I mean, I went to Peru, which I know you wanted to touch on, but we hadn't gotten to yet.
Right.
But
Let's
like,
go.
so there were how many of us? There were 12, 12 Americans. Just well, one Zig's technically, originally from Africa, but she's just an overachiever. She lived in Africa and America. Um, but so most, 13 Americans just going to Peru, and I'm the only one that speaks Spanish. And if I wasn't there, I mean, it would have been the trip would have definitely been different for the group. Like if we're talking about going to Thailand, and in a lot of the big Asian cities, you can get away with English anyway, so it's kind of a moot point. But I can't imagine how much different my experience would have been in Peru if I couldn't have had some of the conversations that I had and relayed some of the information. Like I did a lot of back and forth between some of my friends and some of the locals or people that were helping us along the way.
Right, so I have to stop you. So how did you start conversations with these people? Because I think that's an interesting one and something that people like me who are more introverted kind of suck at or have anxiety about, or they
I
just
think my face just says talk to me.
right.
I just look like someone. I just got such a big beak. It just looks like I want to flap it all the time. But I I think that a lot of it was out of necessity at first. Whether we were asking directions or how much something cost, or what the deal was with our hotel or something like that. I had a lot of those conversations, but there would also be. I mean, there's just a lot. Like, for instance, when we went on a 5-day trek, 4 days of hiking through like the mountains and the wilderness in Peru to get from somewhere near Cusco to Machu Picchu. And we had two guides, and one of them spoke, very good English and was a social extrovert, and he was, the leader of the group. Three of the chef and the two or three baggage and horse guys that, did a lot of the grunt work spoke no English. So when I was hanging out with them, it was a feeling of inclusivity. So I wanted them, to feel more a part of the group. I enjoyed that I was able to, allow them a way to converse with, myself and others when Wilson wasn't around,
Right.
to translate for them. So that was cool. But also just sheer curiosity, like what makes them tick, or like there was this beautiful girl sitting in the lobby. There was like an outdoor lobby at one of our hotels with like a meeting area, and it was myself, my friends Dan and Jana, I think, and there's just this really pretty young girl just sitting there, kind of having a cigarette. You can tell she's like something about travelers too, like people who travel a lot. They just, when you meet at like these hotels or hostels, like people are just much more social than the average person. So you could tell she wanted to talk, and then I started talking to her in Spanish, just kind of small talk, and then turns out she could speak English, so she was able to speak to the four of us in English, and we were able to have a conversation, that included everyone. And it's just kind of curiosity. Like, I want to know, like, it turns out she was from Argentina and she was traveling with her mother, and I was talking about the cities in Argentina and the other South American cities she'd visited. Like, I just want to know pretty much anything anyone will tell me until I decide that it's uninteresting.
Right.
I mean, and fair is fair. That can go the other way too. I'll spew my guts to anyone until they decide that what I'm saying isn't interesting. But I find that to be really fun, and then I find it to be a travesty that there's like a massive percentage of the population of the world that I can't converse with.
That's interesting.
That crosses my mind probably way more than the average person. But like when I'm playing with a guy,
I don't think I've ever had that thought.
there's this guy. One of the weirdest social interactions I've ever encountered, and I'm sure there's some cultural disconnect here, and I'm probably being like an idiot or something. But we were playing 2550 PLO last year with Wei Fang or Wang Feng.
Okay.
I'm butchering the pronunciation of his name, but apparently this guy and his wife, he's like a pop star or something in China. Apparently him and his wife are relatively equivalent to like what Brad and Angelina were in the United States in terms of like power couple popularity.
Huh.
And so this guy's got like a backpack that probably had more money, was like the backpack itself was probably worth more money than my net worth at the time. And then he had like stacks of $10,000 American bills in it, and he was just like handing them to his friends so they could go gamble, and he was gambling with us, right? And he doesn't speak English, so he couldn't have a conversation with anyone at the table. And like occasionally, like a couple of Asian regulars and some of the floor men who speak Chinese or knew who he was were like starstruck by this guy. It was like Justin Bieber was sitting there or something.
Huh.
Like someone really, really famous. And we can't even have a conversation with the guy. And that sucked because like he was kind of bored. He was losing. And, he wasn't like in the best of moods. And it's a situation in poker where selfishly you want to keep the recreational players happy. But it's also just like part of human interaction for me. Like I would rather have a conversation with an international superstar than not have a conversation with him.
So I think a lot of a problem that I used to have, and I still have it, like I don't struggle with it as much, but I just worry that people aren't going to be interesting. And I know it's like complete illogical, and it's probably like a fear-based like defense thing. Because like anytime I have a conversation with someone, it goes really well, and it's always interesting. But it's like, I'm just not interested in interacting with people most of the time. Just not a thing.
Yeah, I mean, you're not alone. There's a lot of people who are introverted socially. I mean, it's not the end of the world. Like you're still able to, have a podcast, have a medium where you have conversations with people. Like you said, your wife was very instrumental in changing you from being an extreme introvert to just like a social introvert, right?
Yeah, a functioning introvert, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, that's it's interesting. I mean, everyone has something to offer. I actually like.
All right, so not Machu Picchu. So what were some of the interesting things you've learned from the people there? Their way of life, their views.
Well, Machu Picchu is just a bunch of.
Or whatever their whole trip you can do if it's easier.
Yeah, Cusco is really interesting. It's like this really old city that has Mayan roots, and the way of life is just incredibly simple. There's like, I want to say 8 churches in like the town center. So there's these massive like old churches that were, beautifully constructed. They told me, but I forget when, and probably like somewhere between the 1400s to 1800s.
Were they like these tall, monolithic looking buildings like the Catholic churches over here, or?
Some of them, yeah, and then some of them were not. I mean, they were definitely built by the Spaniards, I would imagine.
Right.
Not. Yeah, the Spanish conquerors, I think, built the ones that were looking all Catholic and grandiose.
Yeah, the Catholic ones freak me out. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, churches. I mean, churches and me don't get along very well, but they're beautiful buildings. Like we walked around some of them, and they were, I mean, just incredible. Just the architecture and the care that went into it. I mean, I'm very cynical when I'm doing something like that. Like I'm like, man, these guys put so much like in. I say put, but if I'm being fair and honest on this podcast, since this is a safe space, college kids will approve. Um, like, I mean, when I think of it, I think like they wasted so much time, which is not, which is ridiculously unfair of me to think.
Right.
But that's how I think. Like, I wish they had, put their time and energy into something, that could give them something more. But that's just like so wrong of me to say because they got something out of it spiritually. They felt they did. It doesn't even matter if it's real or not, this, that, and the other. But yeah, I mean, these things were incredible. The people were funny because Cusco is like, it's the place where people go to do Machu Picchu stuff.
Okay.
So it's become very like touristy. Like the people that live there definitely live very simply and a lot more similar to the old times in Peru than other places. Like Lima is a very new age city and Cusco is like ancient compared to, like a Lima or New York City or something like that. But the people there are all like hustling because they're just like feeding off the tourist action. So they're all like having the stuff that they probably ordered from China that they're pretending is handmade and trying to sell it to everyone. And there's like a billion of these setups where there's, these tiendas that you go in and there's like two hallways and there's just infinite, like every single place has almost the same exact stuff. Like it's all just like t-shirts and caricatures and pot holders and all sorts of weird stuff. So that part of Cusco's funny. It's just like the hustle and bustle. It's just grinding it out for the tourists. Right. But the people I met on the trek, like the guys, the chef and I mean, they must have been completely shocked because usually these tour groups are like comprised of groups of 1 to 4 all coming together to create a group of like 15 or so. Mm-hmm. But we got a private one because our group was big enough. So like usually the people don't know each other that well and they're like mostly focused on the hike and whoever they're staying in the tent with, their companion that they came with or whatever. But we all knew, had gotten to know each other at that point. Everyone on the trip knew each other before except for me and Brad's sister's boyfriend, probably. So they were all pretty close to begin with, and then we had spent 4 or 5 days in Cusco before we started hiking.
You didn't? Are you saying you didn't know many of them before the trip?
Yeah, the couple that invited me were the only, and Brad. So the couple that invited me was Brad and Zagan. That's like, they're the two people I'm closest with in Las Vegas. Probably the closest thing I have to family out here. And then they had gotten married in South Africa before I met them. And all these people pretty much all of them went to the wedding. There were a couple, like there was one guy who our friend was dating who was kind of new to the group, but they had been dating long enough that everyone knew them. But, pretty much me and him were the only kind of outsiders. So it was really easy for everyone to get together. But, like, so we go on this trek, and, I mean, it's just got to have been, like, a very unique thing for them. Like, the second night, the first night we all passed out. Like, we had hiked from 12,000 to 16,000 feet and then back down to 9. The first day was like ridiculous. Huh. And so we all passed out at like 7:30. Like no one said a word. Everyone just like went and used the like outhouse or whatever and then went to sleep. But the second night we were at this like family's house out in the woods, out in the mountains. And they had these 2 or 3 little kids. there were little boys that were just like running around the campsite, and we were gonna camp there. So there were a bunch of tents set up, and I don't even think that usually they light fires out there. I don't think it's common, or like there was no like fire pit or anything. But they were having such a good time, like running around and just hanging out with us, and the family, thought we were having a good time and apparently deemed us entertaining. So they built a fire and we just like drank our faces off, and we had, a portable boombox playing music, and we were dancing, and then my buddy had this inflatable couch, and the kids were sitting on the couch with us. Like, they would jump on us while we were sitting on the couch. So eventually we got them to sit on one side of the couch, and we would jump on the other side, and it would like fling them up in the air. And I mean, at the end of the day, or at the end of the night, they actually, Zagan convinced Dan, or came up with the idea for Dan to give them the inflatable couch. And I had to go tell that to the family and ask them if it was okay. And it was just fun, man. I mean, it had to be so different from them, and just talking to the two guys that we were with the most, that were our guides. I mean, they have such a different life, but at the end of the day, they're just like, they're just people, and it's just so cool it was so cool to like go through that and have them enjoy us as a group, and us, really connect with them. And one of the guys was much like you. Like, he was incredibly introverted and didn't speak English very well, so that probably had a lot to do with it too. But he loves the mountains. Like, he is just so at peace up there, and just really enjoys being out there. So I starting conversations with him, and he started, opening up. He was asking me about, like, I want to say he was 2 or 3 years younger than me. And he was just asking me about the women in Las Vegas and New York and Los Angeles. And, he was talking about his life and why he enjoys the mountains, and telling me how he was so shy and all this stuff. And, talking about trying to learn English. Like, we would have most of our conversations in Spanish, but he would always ask me, how to say stuff. And he ended up walking with me and the group that I stuck with for most of the trek. And I think it was like, an unlikely bonding situation, where if he was with this group and no one had spoke Spanish, he probably just would have kept to himself and hiked and had a fine time. But it was cool for us to be able to talk to him and kind of shoot the shit while we're out there hiking.
That's pretty cool. So you did Mexico, and was that it, or
Yeah, I had lived in Mexico for 6 months, but I had never really left. Like, I'd never left the continent.
Right. Okay. I thought for some reason you traveled all over or something like that. So it was just like Machu Picchu and Couscous and all that.
Yeah, we just that 15 days in Peru. That's all I got under my belt. I mean, the 6 months in Mexico is interesting, but it's not really traveling.
Yeah. I haven't traveled like a pretty long time. That kind of goes out the window with 2 kids. But not a thing that gets done. I mean, it's not impossible. It's just much more difficult than.
Certainly much harder for families to travel. My parents are going to Costa Rica in January sometime for their 30th anniversary party celebration.
Right.
And it's like, I mean, I don't think, my mom went to Europe when she was like 16. I think that was the last time she had traveled outside the U.S. Besides Canada.
So backtracking a ton, because it sort of relates, because I think it's a lot of people would love to go to Machu Picchu, but don't want to go by themselves. And it's interesting, the last podcast guest I had, you'd really like him, actually. I should introduce you to. He goes on vacations all alone.
I like everyone except the people I don't.
So he goes on vacations all by himself, and he does that full knowing he's just gonna like meet people there and just have a really good time.
One of my closest friends just did that.
which I can't ever imagine doing, but it's pretty cool. He's the most
Does
social.
that sound like your nightmare?
Yeah, I just spend the whole time like chilling by myself in the hotel.
You're just like, wow, France looks like the inside of a Marriott to me.
I read this book. It's called like "Me Talk So Pretty," and Me Talk Pretty one day, and he goes to France, he goes to Paris, and he spends the whole time. Apparently, there's just a lot of theaters there with American movies, old ones, and he just spends the whole time at the theater, and it's pretty hilarious. And he has like friends come over, they'd visit, and they'd be like, yeah, you want to go to the Louvre, or I don't know how to pronounce it, or the Eiffel Tower. He's like, well, no, there's like the 6:30 showing of Billy Madison or something like that.
I'd probably go to that.
Right? It was an amazing, hilarious book. So, anyways, you went from knowing one person in Vegas to having like pretty big circle of friends.
Yeah, tons of acquaintances. Vegas is a funny place, but they are friends. I don't want to pretend that I'm not friends with them or shit on them or anything. But it's just this is definitely a place where I've met a ton of people, but it's a very transient place.
Right. A lot of them like leave or whatever. But how did you go about doing that? But I'm asking that question, but I guess I know how. You kind of just have lots of conversations with people all the time.
Well, it's definitely different in Vegas. I guess I'm a decent networker. Like, if I play with someone at a poker table and I find them interesting, I'll be able to find a way to stay in contact with them. But like I said, for the most part, it's a very transient town. A lot of people leave. So my original friends group definitely stemmed from I moved in with the guy I'd mentioned earlier, Kevin Colenso.
Mm-hmm.
I moved in with his brother when he was having some roommate issues or needed a roommate. So I met a couple of his friends and had a small expansion in the people I knew and the social circles I hung out in. And then, originally, the first like batch of people I met were definitely poker players, just because they're the only ones I would meet at a poker table that were staying in Las Vegas for any discriminate amount of time.
Right.
And then, a couple random things. Like I met a kid who does Cirque du Soleil here at a poker table. So he was just like an extreme sports junkie. Got into rollerblading like really young, and apparently the Cirque guys, like talent scouts for Cirque du Soleil, just go to these competitions where these kids are competing for like, $500 first prize at a rollerblading competition. They're like, hey, how would you like to do dangerous stunts for Cirque du Soleil?
Huh.
So that was interesting. Got to learn a little bit about how that whole thing goes down. But then, yeah, I mean, I just talk to people, man. I went through a long stint, and I'm still a pretty big fan of it, but now that I'm trying to be like money conscious and not go completely broke ever again, I stopped. But I used to get a lot of table massages just because I loved, when I was playing a long session, getting a massage at the poker table. And I made a couple of good friends that way. Just like a couple of the girls that work at Wynn would like go out with them or hang out with them and kind of meet their friends group. Just to like, at one point, so like the first couple of years in Vegas, I just didn't really have that many friends that weren't in poker or gambling. So I just like had this desire to, expand that friends group. And there aren't that many people out here. I mean, it's hard to meet people out here, I guess what I'm saying, outside of, the small bubble. But that was kind of how I went about it, is I just started talking to massage therapists, and the ones that didn't think it was fucking weird were like, yeah, let's go hang out. And then one of my buddies is like girlfriends definitely helped to expand the friends group, because they do something other than play poker, and they know people that don't play poker for a living, and that just kind of has a snowball effect. You just start picking up people all over. Honestly, the trip to Peru was great because myself and Brad and Dan Hinden were the only three professional poker players on the trip in a group of 14 people. And 9 of those people live in Las Vegas, I believe. So that was like an expansion for me of sorts.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Most of the people I deal with play poker for a living.
Yeah.
And it's hard to kind of expand that base unless you're consistently talking with people outside of poker, I guess.
Yeah, there's definitely people at the poker table who don't play poker, and I like latch onto those people because they, especially in the big games, like when I'm playing really big, I'm the first person to like get a phone number, an email, or whatever but from one of those guys because they all have they're all successful at something, so I feel like they have something to offer at some point, kind of like you were talking about earlier. It's not the end all be all, but it's a good place to, it's a good number to keep in the back pocket or whatever. But I mean, the way that I meet people is just kind of very opposite of what you're talking about and how you approach social situations. Like I just remembered I was at one of my favorite restaurants the other day. I was waiting to pick up Brad and Sig from the airport, so I was actually I was watching their dogs. So I went out and like ate alone, like I wasn't with anyone, and I sat at the bar, and I know the bartender because Brad and I used to go talk to the bartender, and so I already know him, and we're having conversation. And then this couple sits down, and they start conversation with me. Like I said, I just kind of give off that vibe, like I'm willing to chat with anyone. And then we started talking. The guy ended up giving me his email, and he does business in like Thailand and 4 surrounding countries. And he's like, if you're ever in, the area and you want to go out for a beer, or, ask any questions about the area, feel free to hit me up. And I just got an email from him the other day.
Right. Yeah, I probably give closer to like the fuck off vibe.
Yeah, it's not the worst thing. I mean, it's definitely there's a time and a place for the fuck off vibe, and there's a time and a place for the talk to me vibe. Like when you're a single guy in Peru and there's like a smoking hot 23-year-old Argentinian girl, that's a good time to have the talk to me vibe, I would say.
Right.
But when
GTO.
When you're at like a biker bar and people aren't looking like they're all that interested in having you around, that's a good time to give off the fuck off vibe, I'd say.
So who's been the most influential in your life the past few years? I feel like I've asked you this before.
You definitely did, because it's such a crazy hard question to answer. If you narrow it down to like the last couple of years, it's probably pretty easy. But mostly because my influences have been so spread out and I've traveled so much. But like, I would say probably Brad Lipson, because when I met him playing 2-5, and he's he keeps coming up. He's one of the people that went on this trip. His wife organized the whole thing. When I met him, I was just starting to play like 5-10 or starting to win at 5-10 and be a consistent regular there. And I had a lot of fringe friends in Vegas and not many really close ones. And he was both like a person that like we definitely get along very well, and we have a lot of similar interests and like having absurd conversations about pretty much anything. So that part works out well socially. But from a poker standpoint, I mean, he was everything that I wasn't. He was experienced and successful, and he has a wife, a house, 3 dogs. Like he's got the whole thing worked out, for the most part, and obviously still learning poker like everyone else in the world. But just the experience that he has and the ability to play multiple games and the ability to play multiple games well, he's probably been the most influential recently, just from a poker and like a life standpoint. It's much easier, I find, age isn't everything, Like, if, someone's 30 years old, but they've been trading stocks for 12 years, then they're a perfectly reasonable person to learn how to trade stocks from. Just because they're not 50 doesn't mean, they're less experienced. But I mean, for poker, the amount of years Brad had spent in it, and he's about 6 or 7 years older than me, which is like a lifetime in poker, 6 or 7 years. Um, so yeah, it's really easy for him to have things to offer me.
Right. So I should get into this, even though it's not the best tangent. Well, it's a decent tangent. I don't need to do these disclaimers. What
No,
are
the
your
podcast is yours, man. You just let it flow.
Yeah? So what is your plans for? You want to talk about like future plans? What are you? I guess 2000 end of the year is kind of like a reflective period, goal
Yeah, let's make
setting.
some resolutions, eh?
Are you a resolution guy? I don't think I've ever made
Fuck
one.
no. No, I'm not a goals guy or a resolution guy, but plans are good. I like plans.
What's the plan?
What's the plan? Well, I definitely I have a reinvigorated energy about me in as far as poker goes, with regard to poker. I want to, since I've spent so much time playing this game and, have kind of just floated around working minimal hours, making money, and then dusting it off before it ever had a chance to, go anywhere useful. I mean, I've had a lot of fun, but, I'm not like set up for the future or anything by any stretch of the imagination. So I think that nose to the grindstone poker wise is going to be in the immediate future for me. I think I only missed 2 days in December. I think I played at least 5 hours every other day.
You play 28 days this month? Is that
Yeah,
what you mean? Wow. Okay.
yeah. Like I played on Christmas even. I played like 5 or 6 hours on Christmas.
Damn. Going hard.
Yeah, that's what running out of money will do.
Right.
So being broke is a good motivator, but yeah, just like definitely, I want to put in serious hours and kind of cut the crap with like living in limbo. Like I had so much fun, being successful at poker and kind of skating by on some talent and some hard work at times, but never really, putting it all together or getting diligent with saving and planning. I mean, that's definitely gonna be a cornerstone of the new year, even though I didn't plan it that way to fall exactly on the new year.
Right. What's the saving or planning strategy for money? Because I think it's an interesting problem, and one I've definitely had. A lot of poker players, even if you look at them, they have a lot of profit. That doesn't necessarily mean they have very much money.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I haven't met any poker player who just like has never been broke or never fallen on tough times in their career. I've never, and like most of the people I know that are rich from poker, there's very few that are like, there's a very tiny, tiny subset of our population as a poker community that are both extremely talented and extremely affluent. And I think that a lot of it is luck. I mean, Brad and I talk about that all the time. There's, other poker players, and I'll talk about it. Like, you gotta run really good to get rich playing poker. I mean, it doesn't matter how good you are. You have to run really good. Like,
I sort of disagree, but I kind of feel like it didn't matter how much money I made when I was younger. I was
you're
gonna
right over.
I was gonna run through it all.
Yeah,
That's
I mean, I definitely feel like that was 20 to 25 for Ronnie. Like, I was glad that I went broke from 50K to zero the first time, because it would have been so much more devastating to go broke from like 500K to zero. Or like, I think some of my friends that I've made that are, older than me and played closer to the more glory days dusted off like, a million. even like $1 million cash bankroll just like sunk. So
Yeah. I
um,
I blew through like 3 or 4 6-figure rolls or something.
yeah, I mean it was definitely it's like the Wild West back then, man. I missed all that, but I it's easy to do. People don't realize that. Like there's a reason why lottery winners go broke, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that they're fundamentally retarded for playing the lottery. Um but like people don't understand, like people always look at the other side, or like they look at other people's situations and they just want to hate. They just want to throw shade like, "Oh, like that football player went broke. What an idiot. Like, what a fucking moron." And it's like, you don't, like, no one ever bothers to dissect their situation or, like, walk a mile in their shoes. Like, kids coming out of high school, a lot, like, I watched the documentary Broke. It's a 30 for 30, the ESPN films. It's like, they're all just brilliantly done by really good directors. And they were looking at all these professional athletes that made millions to tens of millions to hundreds of millions of dollars, and everyone who was in the documentary went broke. And there was a myriad of reasons, but a lot of them were uneducated because they, planned on being a professional athlete or were pulled out of college to be a professional athlete or whatever, what have you. Like no one had ever taught them life skills. A lot of them came from single parent households or, didn't just bad education systems in general. And they're thrust into, playing for the New York Jets and live in New York, like really high taxes. You make like $2 million, in your first 3 years, you get taxed like a millionaire. So that gets cut in half. And then you blow out your knee and you're cut. I mean, there's a guy whose only discernible life skill to this point is to play professional football. Now they can't play professional football, and they were supposed to stretch like 1.5 million in earnings over 40 years of their life or 50 years of their life or whatever. It's like a big uh-oh moment.
Right. I do think though that
Similar for players.
I do think though that there are. I haven't. Well, I don't know if I've met any, but I imagine there exists a smart grinder who isn't like hitting like huge scores or anything, but is spending and investing their profits wisely.
Yeah, but a lot of those guys inherently don't have much to invest.
Right.
That's like the catch-22 with it all. Is like you have to kind of catch fire in a barrel in a way, but you also just have to be like balance. We talk about balance in poker a lot. Balance has come up both in poker and life discussions during this conversation we've had, but balance in terms of having the balls and the wherewithal to try and make some money. Try to make more than try to not live off $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year playing poker. And then, so that there's like that balance of having the gusto to try and go get it and not be complacent. And then having the wherewithal to like save some money. And when you're making $80,000, $100,000, $200,000 a year to not blow through it all like a maniac.
Right. I don't know if they don't have the money to invest. So like, for example, if I started my career and just invested like $500 a month in the S&P 500, I'd have like 6 figures in my bank account. That's like wouldn't have been a problem for me at almost any time in my career.
Yeah.
And not only would I gain that money and like gain money and interest, and I just wouldn't have that money to spend. Because, like, if I see...
Are you talking about long-term investment?
Yeah, just like long-term investment.
I mean, everyone... Yeah, in theory, everyone has the money to start, like, an IRA or something. And that's something that I've talked about the last 3 years, and I've just always, like, flaked on it. So that's probably going to be something that I invest in, but that's a really small piece of what I want to do because, like, let's say that theoretically I have $100,000 or something, right? And that's like a bankroll to work with. I don't want. Now, I have this argument with people all the time too. People who said, "Well, you have gone broke, and you do want to like do this stuff, like invest small amounts here and there." But like, I invested in some ETFs. I had some money put aside that I had a plan. Like, I think it was when I went to Mexico. I drew up this plan, and I won money, playing Zoom somehow, and then came back with more money and started winning when I was playing in Vegas. And I was like, all right, I'm going to put like $500 a month into ETFs and Apple stock was where I started. And I made some money. I invested like, I don't know, $5,000 over the course of many, months.
Right.
And eventually it made like $300.
Right.
And I look at myself as a poker player, and this is what this is what everyone has to do. Because really, when you're talking about investing, there's two types of investments in my mind. There's an investment that you're making because it's the most efficient way to use your money at that time. And there's an investment that you're making to plan for yourself screwing up. Right? Yeah. So those are two vastly different things.
Right.
If I look at my $100,000 bankroll, that we have in this example I'm about to put forth, $100,000 is not like that can essentially almost all be in play in poker, like playing the stakes I do very easily. So if I think that I need,
you should never have your whole bankroll on the table. What are you talking about? What do you mean?
Right, not literally in play, but its utility is going to, like, yes, technically speaking, you're right, it's never all going to be on the table. But its utility to me, sitting in the box being ready to play poker, is worth more dollars an hour or a larger percentage at the end of the year, however you want to look on it. The return on investment is higher than if I put $50,000 in the bank and now only have $50,000 to play poker with. Because this is a real life situation that happens for someone with a $100,000 bankroll and my skill set. I come into the poker room at the win,
right? But
and I see.
I don't think that's the only option though. Like the $500 a month option, I think is pretty reasonable. And I think if you take the short term outlook,
yeah, but that's planning. That's option number 2, right?
Right.
I mean, that's planning for yourself to screw up.
I mean, I guess it's sort of
so
planning.
Listen to what I mean. So, okay. or let me at least get through the thought. The 100K, right? That bankroll. Obviously, I'm not going to buy into a game for 100K of all my own money and just be like, all right, let's fucking win tonight. Let's not lose tonight, right? But let's say I walk into the win and I see 3 whales that I know are just giving it away, like games that are going to be like $1,000 an hour or more. Those games come around in 2016, about to be 17, I guess, just like astronomically less often than they used to. So let's say I want to play in that game, and I think that having 20% of myself or 30-40% of myself in that game is the right play, right? I still need $100,000 in cash to play that game. I'm just selling pieces of myself to people who I trust and who want to do business with me. Like, I still need to be able to do that. So in this example, the utility of 100K is very real, and it's very clear to me, given hourlies and ROI, that it's better invested in poker than in the short-term market.
So that's an interesting example, but the counter argument would be how liquid is that money in the bank. So, for example, if you just want to say that $50K in the bank,
impossible. It's like light years away if it's in the bank.
Is it? Because
I mean, that game is full in like seconds.
But if you have $50K, like, isn't that enough to sit down in the game?
But yeah, but your utility's going down if you can't play. You see what I mean?
Well, I just mean, like, you could just do a mind trick and say that $50K I had in the bank, which wasn't part of my poker bankroll, is now part of my poker bankroll.
Yeah, but you understand what happens if I lose $100,000 in this, right? like I'm still getting 80K back the next day, or 70K or 60K back the next day. We took a shot and we missed, but we still retained our bankroll.
Right.
But the utility, I can't play in that game if I have 50K in cash in my box in this example. I mean, that's the crazy part of it. That's like the absurdity of what the decisions that go into how you invest your money as a poker player, because like the options are endless. But the reality of it is, if I have $1 million bankroll, very easily I can put 500K in the bank or something.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine a huge difference in utility between 50 and 100K. And yeah, you're right. My example, like, just doesn't count because you can't just say like, oh, now I have a 100K bankroll now because I'm going to take that money out of the
Yeah,
bank.
it's just like my expected value in poker for the year went down by putting 50K in the bank,
Right.
and it didn't increase. Like it hurt my overall gain short term. It didn't really help my overall gain long term that much. Because if I make 200K playing poker and my bankroll goes to 300K, I mean I'm still agreeing with your point of siphoning money off to invest. That's something that I will be doing. Like I'll be taking a little bit out here, or I'll be like, if I have 100K, I'm going to be pumping 5K a year into the Roth IRA, right? As long as I qualify for it, because you can put up to like 5K untaxed or whatever. And then like you can put like 50K a year into a self-employment retirement fund, but I'm not a big retirement fund guy. I go back and forth on them.
Right. Am I looking at this wrong? So the way I would look at it, so you said, you put in 5K, you made 300. The way I would look at it is like long-term investment. If you invested, well, let's just use my example. Like if you invest 500 a month for 14 years, your return on investment is like 100% over 14 years. Is that the wrong way to look at it? Is that like... Because I would say, oh, I doubled my money. I put in 72K, I got back 144K.
You look at return on investment as not what happens over a long span of time.
Right.
Like your return on investment is 6%. It's just that you're making money on profits. So if you look at it in that way, like if you invest in like the safe market right now, your ROI is going to be somewhere between 3 and 6%, right?
Right. So simply, it's the calculation. It's not just, it's return on investment times the amount of time it takes as well.
Yeah. You're looking at how much that money is going to increase, because once you profit, that is now a part of the bankroll. So you can't like skew the number by saying like, oh, well, I started with 500 and now I have 100,000. It's like, well, no, you started with 500, then you had 505, and then you had like, you made 6% every day or year or whatever.
6% a day would be sick.
Yeah, 6% a day would be awesome.
Right. So so you think
if it was 6% a day, I'd fire that 100K into the market and then just like sit back on a couch and watch some hockey.
Just make 6K a day, easy game.
Yeah.
So you don't think you should? Well, you were saying you don't think you should put that money in unless it's like don't fuck up type of strategy. You think it's
well? So this is like a game theory optimal thing, right? Like this is looking at me as a human being who plays professional poker, what is optimal, and then what is like practical, and then how much room for error is there? Am I overestimating my edge here or underestimating the edge in the market, this, that, and the other? Am I overestimating how much money I need? Like, am I overestimating the utility of 100K versus 50K or 100K versus 80K? These are all things that are incredibly interesting, and there is something to be said for diversification. I just think at this point in my life, like right now, as I stand still, like very single, nowhere near having to like care for other people financially or anything like that, I think that choosing what appears to me to be the most dollar optimal route is the best way to go at every corner until I get to the point where I have money that I'm like, oh, that's sitting around. Like that's not something I need to use. That's like just sitting there and it's making $0 on itself every day. And that's when I start to think about investing.
I think that's pretty interesting. My buddy's dream is to get to like make enough money just off the interest every year to not ever have to work to pay his bills.
Yeah, that's definitely a good place to be.
Yeah, if you, I would probably need like 1 million and make like 6-7% to do that though. Invested.
Yeah. I mean, shit, I just have like I have no I'm very reckless in terms of thinking about the future. Mostly because of like a very logical and like scary to some people, but like just this view that like that shit is so not guaranteed.
Right.
like like I sound like, a rapper or something. Like I just, like spend it while it's here. Like but and that's not necessarily how I'm living. I'm trying to set myself up in the best way possible for the future, but like in terms of retirement and like my buddy works just went he played poker with me all the way through. He's like one of my best friends in the world, but he's like the superstar. He crushed poker just as hard as I have at pretty much every point in his life, but he's also been getting a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and then a job. so, so like, he's envious of the lifestyle. Like we have conversations about it. He's like, yeah, it would be cool to be able to do this or do that, but he's very happy with what he's doing and he's just crushing. So
Right.
he's got the one up there.
Right.
But he always tells me, because he works for Fidelity in Boston, and he's talking about investments and stuff like that all the time. And I've had many a conversation about this with him, and I think fundamentally he agrees with me, but practically he thinks I should have more money than I do because I should have done some things differently.
like what?
Well, he definitely has tried to get me to invest and do certain things at certain times. I mean, it's funny because I've probably made him 6 figures in poker, and and I have very little money, and he has all of that and more left. So it's funny. Pretty much every big score I've ever had, he's had a piece of. I mean, we were sharing bankrolls back in the day. Like when we were playing MTTs, we were splitting everything 50-50 just to reduce the variance because we had so much faith in each other.
Huh. That's pretty cool.
But yeah, I mean, I think he would agree with you in some ways. I think he would definitely advise me to take $20,000 of that $100,000 and put it somewhere else.
I haven't advised that. I was
Well, 500 at a time, you did.
right, which I guess is a bit different, but for me personally, it's like a not fuck up strategy, kind of like you
Right.
said.
Well, and that's what I was getting at with the, I wasn't advertising to your female listeners. When I was saying I was single, I was just trying to say that it would be much different for me if I was choosing a different lifestyle. Like if I had a house, a dog, a wife, that kind of stuff, kids especially. I mean, there would have to be a much different approach, and I would take a much different approach. So I guess in that sense, I'm just like, I'm saying that if I was being responsible for someone I cared about immensely, then I would put in a lot more safeguards. But because I care more about my forward progress than my own well-being, if I screw it up, then I just like won't do that for myself.
I think that's really cool. It makes perfect sense, and I don't view this as like a straight mathematical calculation. And most books I mean, I used to read a lot about investing, but I don't know shit about it. But it's pretty rare that I would read a book. I mean, most books would just say it really depends on your risk tolerance and your situation. And lifestyle choice.
Yeah, I mean, I think that risk tolerance is a very tangible thing for every person, every adult, especially people 20 to 35, 20 to 40, I guess you can expand it to, as they're getting married later and later in this generation. But like, it changes so much. I mean, it's a real thing, and you have to. Everyone has to pick a risk management strategy that they can live with, because there's a lot of people that, had they gone through the financial highs and lows that I have, they would not be able to withstand it mentally, and they would break down.
Right. There's also the calculation of like, how bad is it to go busto?
Right.
And
That's another one.
for me to go busto with 2 kids and third on the way, by the way, just found out today.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Wow, live breaking news in the podcast.
Yeah, too many kids.
No, Three's Company.
Yeah, it was the first time we were actually trying to have a kid. The first 2 times we did not want to have them, and we both cried when we found out, like tears of sadness.
Are you going to leave that part out at the Sweet 16, or are you going to lead with that?
I think I've told my oldest daughter that, but I'm like, yeah, it worked out really great now. We both really love you.
We love you. We're happy. But we cried tears of sadness when we found out you were coming.
I mean, we were just both 18, and we were kind of
young, man.
Yeah, we were traveling a lot and having a lot of fun. I was poker upswinging.
Yeah, upswings.
Yeah, having a kid's like pretty life-changing. But anyways, like going busto for me is much different than going busto for you.
Right. Like, I just have to, move in with my buddy and like get a steak. that's about it. Like, I just got to eat ramen for a couple months. Like,
right. Easy
and
game.
I mean, obviously, I'm at a point where I have bills, I have expenses, I have a life that I want to live, and I have things that I want to do. So going busto for me at 27, like we're talking like busto. Like, I'm making jokes about being poor, and it sucks to go through financial hardships that are caused solely by yourself, because you can't blame anyone else. But luckily I'm not busto. But at 27, it would hurt more than at 22 and 25. And it's creeping towards that, like, my safety net's getting slightly higher. It's been lifted off the ground. It's like, going up a little bit. And I'm trying to, find some footing and balance in that regard. But for the most part, I mean, it still wouldn't drastically affect me if everything that the thing that's like going busto for me now, it's not like it's a huge catastrophe life-wise. It's just dumb. Like, it's just like I have all the skills to not be busto, and this is actually going to be, and I'm not even sure, I might be like completely on the come around, but this would be the first year ever, if I do have a losing year, or if I did have a losing year, that I've ever even had a losing year. So, like, it's not like poker's been the problem. It's 100% been spending and money management.
What do you spend on? That's, like, ridiculous.
I mean, I eat out a ton. I went on a 5K vacation when I was in the middle of a massive downswing. Like, the vacation wasn't even that expensive, but I didn't own any hiking gear or any like stuff for the trip, and just bought a bunch of stuff. And
Right.
I mean, I bought a BMW when I was worth like, I think I had 100. I think I had let me get this right, because it's pretty funny. I think I had $130,000 liquid, somewhere between 120 and 150, like American cash dollars in my possession at the time. And I went to the BMW dealership with like a $14 backpack with $50,000 in it in cash. And like I walk in the door and they're like, who the fuck is this guy? And some guy comes over, he's like, hey man, you looking for a car? I'm like, yeah, I want to test drive that red one. I'm like, he's like, all right, what do you think? I'm like, oh, I don't like the red one, but do you have a black one? Because I want it by tomorrow. And he convinced me to finance it, and I put like 20K down, kind of as a safety net to myself. And then I went on a downswing, and I could have made better money decisions.
Right. I after I got like fifth in the W Coupe main event, which was like when I was 17, I went to the Jaguar dealer, dropped like 90K on a car. I sold it recently.
I don't think. I mean, I'll definitely have some cars in my day if things go well, but I don't think I'll ever like that. As soon as I did it once, I was over it. I was like, okay, I don't like care to do this ever again. Whereas my buddy Butters, do you know Butters?
No.
He's an OG, I guess, but he's been around forever. He got, not this year, but last year, I think he got like top 18 in the main. But anyway, he just like, I think he's gone through 4 or 5 cars recently that are like over 50K.
Nice.
Just absurdity. Some of them closer to 100 or maybe over 100. But like, that's the DGen lifestyle, man. Buying cars, because those things are like the worst investment ever.
Yeah,
Snap appreciation.
I sold mine for 16K later.
Yeah, I'm gonna happily sell this thing for like 20 at some point or less.
Yeah, my whole like lifestyle was like that. I remember walking into the Gucci store, picking out a pair of like black loafers in a few seconds, trying them on, like, yeah, I'll take these. Just like 600.
Yeah. I mean, I played a lot of golf. I used to drink and gamble too, and like occasionally that's come back to haunt me. Like that's just a terrible leak for a poker player to have.
Right.
Gambling is like actually playing pit games and stuff is just like that's the end all be all for poker players. Like if you do that, you'll never be rich. That's like, I mean, some of those athletes I was talking about going broke, like they say Michael Jordan would have been a billionaire like 20 years ago if it wasn't for his gambling problem. Like he's lost hundreds of millions of dollars gambling.
That's insane. Do you still gamble?
No, not like, I mean, I don't really drink.
Right.
That's kind of my fix for that is like when I'm in Las Vegas. I mean, I'll drink at like a friend's house or something, but pretty much just try not to drink.
Right. So when you drink, you gamble, like the two are entangled.
Yeah, like if I lose $100 sober, I'm like pissed. But if I'm drunk, I'm like, all right, let's take this 50K and try to make $1 million.
Are you serious? What was the most you've dropped gambling?
Biggest gambling loss? Probably like 30 to 40.
What?
Yeah. That wasn't like a frequent thing, but there was a period, like a dark period, where I actually, the worst thing that happened the worst thing that could happen happened, and I won 80K one night, like off 3K buy-in with a buddy.
Okay.
And I won like 100K another night, like 6 to 8 months later.
Playing what?
I was playing blackjack.
That has to be really fun.
It's an incredible feeling. That's the problem. It's like it gets into like because it's definitely like a drunk psyche thing. Like right now, I mean, you could tell me that I have a chance to win $1 million, and I just would be like, yeah, but I'm just not going to play blackjack. But like when I got drunk and I was like, oh, this is really fun, and then I won, and I was like, oh, this is exceptionally fun. That was just like a thing.
If your biggest loss was 40 and your biggest win was 100, are you up lifetime gambling? Is that a thing?
I may
It's
I
close.
mean, the thing is, like, I've had 2 or 3 wins at like 80 or above, and I've had like 2 more at like 30. But I've had plenty of like 5-figure losses.
Right. Just a lot of 10K, 20K losses.
Yeah, just like a little 5 to 15K ball here and there. Well, when we were being young and wild.
What is it
Um,
like the next
I
day
think I am
lose?
up in blackjack. Yeah, I think I have to be.
What is it like the next day after losing 40K? Just can't imagine.
Um, I don't know, man. I think I'm just like a sociopath or something. I mean, yeah, like it felt shitty, and I had a day where I mean, usually just like my head hurt because I was hungover.
I guess it's like poker. I mean, I could go on like big downswings. Just like, all right, wake up, grind again tomorrow. Let's get after it.
Yeah, like it's just an absolute savage. Now that you ask me the question, and I think about like honest answer. It makes me feel kind of psychotic, but yeah, I mean, you feel like the biggest moron in the world, right?
Right.
And then you wake up, and then you're like, all right, what's my current financial situation? And then you like look at that, and you're like, all right, well, this is what we're gonna do. And then you live. Then you just keep living. It's like honestly, I felt like I mean, obviously, it's nice to have like 100K in a Manila envelope in cash. Like, that kind of soothes your pain. But like, I felt like just as big of a dick after I like the morning after I won.
Huh. That's interesting.
Like, I felt like an absolute piece of shit the morning I won. Like, I mean, it's just drinking and gambling is bad. I don't advise it.
Maybe like 20, 30 minutes or something. I don't know. Whenever this thing's over.
I feel nauseous.
All right.
It's time.
Time for what?
The baby, we have to
I
go.
think you got another 9 months.
No.
Um.
Man.
So how did you stop gambling? Was it, or stop drinking rather? 'Cause drinking was kind of the cause of it.
Um, I wish I had like an answer. I was just like I don't want to drink anymore, so I just stopped. And then
Was it just the rock bottom moment?
when I want to drink it, no, like I mean I've like I said I've had plenty of days and nights over the years, and I was just like that never really like made it sink in when I was young and just like firing away, and then um honestly, I was probably like 6 months removed from my biggest, like the worst thing that had happened since. Yeah, so what I'm trying to say is like when I just stopped. So like I didn't like I haven't stopped drinking completely.
Right.
Um, but I did take 6 months off before Peru, and that was just kind of like I was just kind of fed up with like being unhealthy and being like a shitty version of myself. And that's, I mean, drinking definitely does that for me. I mean, some people, more power to them, can just like socially drink or borderline, be an alcoholic and just function like normal, and it doesn't really affect tons of parts of their lives, or at least outwardly it doesn't. But like for me, I mean, I drink very occasionally, but then I just like go super hard. Like, I mean, I'm just like complete party mode when I do drink. So I mean, it was just something for me where I just kind of got over it. I was just like done. I just didn't want to.
Right.
And then we went to Peru, and I was with like a great group of people, and didn't have a car to drive, didn't have like, anything crazy to screw up. And I was just like, oh, I want to drink. And then I drank the whole trip.
Cool.
It's just kind of, I don't know, just kind of turn it on and off, I guess. I don't have like a big solution, or didn't like wise up after one of those times or something. It just kind of like got old.
Right. No, I think it's interesting. Like, I like honest answers, and I think that is kind of valuable because I think I've been kind of thinking about like the way change really happens, and I'm not necessarily sure if you could just implement strategies, and if you have a good strategy, you just change. And I kind of feel like I've been feeling like there needs to be this up and down oscillation type of period of lots of bad experiences with it. Not just like one, lots of bad experiences, and just eventually you kind of hit that point where you really need to change. And that's like where you can implement the good strategies and have them be effective. Intuitively, I just feel like people are trying to change before they're able to. And then they feel like,
Intuitively, like I think that um, pretty much. I mean, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but like you just can't change anything in your life until you want to.
right,
And when you, that's the very simplistic view of it. And then you look at, people that have had like drug problems that are clean or like, this, that, and the other. You could go through a myriad of different things that people want to change about their life or they say they want to change. But until there's a couple ways that in my experience that, people get there. Sometimes they're addicted to a bad behavior or addicted to a substance or whatever. And I think in many cases you just have to like replace the addiction. So like you have to find something to get addicted to that's healthy. Like I have friends that, have been through the step programs and have been sober for like 25 years or something. And, for the most part, they're still this like overbearing personality who's like absurdly addicted to something. They just got addicted to like healthy habits, you know?
right. Reminds
And
me of, I read this book, Be Obsessed or Be Average by Grant Cardone.
I have heard of many people talk about this book, that it was like really interesting.
Oh, it's a really great book. One of the best books I've read this year. And he used to be drug addict, alcoholic, was not effective at all in life, went to rehab, and the guy told him, like as he was walking out the door, you'll never amount to anything. And he said the exact same thing. He just switched his obsessions from, from bad obsessions to good obsessions.
Yeah, I think it's so drastically different depending on the personality, as so many things are. Like I think the people that are like really easily like addicted to stuff, like for me with drinking, it was never that problem. Like I wasn't the person that was drinking like, 6, 7 nights a week and like going ham. It was just like, it was just very habitual. And that's been with a lot of things for me. I'm just like very flaky in and out of everything. So for change to actually happen for me, it was definitely not that part, which definitely is viable for a lot of people. Replacing one addiction with another, or one obsession with another, is a very viable strategy to implement change. But like for me, it was just, it always has been just kind of coming to a point where I want to achieve something, and if I deem something in the way of me achieving what I actually want to achieve, then I'll be able to drop it. The same way when I was in school, like when I went to college, I very quickly realized in the opposite direction that this was something I had no desire to accomplish at that time in my life. Like I didn't want to go to school just for the sake of, making guidance counselors and parents happy. And I saw no reason for me to be there at that time in my life, and I left. Like the same is true when I want something. If I want to like be healthier and more successful, which is what kind of spawned this change in my drinking habits, is like I want something and drinking's just getting in the way. And that applies to many things in my life more than just drinking, but that's how habits change for me.
Right. I think that's interesting that it's strategies are kind of personal. Like trying to like say tell someone, you know, for you to kick this habit, you must switch obsessions. It's like a good general strategy, but I feel like it's saying in poker, like, you know, you should check raise the river if you have the ace of spades and the three spades on the board. It's like,
Yeah, it's like when you're dealing with humans, people like I know that everyone wants like simple, right? Like they don't want to hear that they have to like go to the gym for, 20 hours a week to look like, a fucking professional athlete. They just want to order that thing that they wear on their stomach, around the house, and then they just like get flat abs like the infomercial. But when you deal with human beings, it's never simple. Like it's always going to be, instead of someone saying this is my problem and then someone telling them this is the solution, which is very rarely going to work. You're just throwing darts hoping that that person's personality matches, the solution you found for them or have ready for them. Like the first question when someone says like this is my problem should be, well, how is it affecting you?
right.
And that's how you problem solve with human beings. You have to figure out how it affects them personally and like what's going on.
Right.
But people would rather just be like, well, if you have shitty hair, use like this conditioner. You're good. It says that it makes your hair thicker on the conditioner bottle.
Right.
So like that's what it does. It's not like what are you eating or like what is at the root of having thin hair or like what genetics what genetical, problems go into this. What hurdles do you have to overcome genetically? Like some people are just going to lose their hair or have shitty hair. But no, like if you just use this conditioner, you'll be good. Like I don't have to know anything about you.
Right. So it's interesting because the way we look at poker situations is it depends on all the variables, and the better you are, the more variables you can't consider during a hand, whether consciously or subconsciously. And I think life situations require what you were talking about, like this self-knowledge and knowledge of human behavior in general.
Yeah, I mean, you need as much information as possible. That's how problem solving works at the root, in a very simplistic sense. That's how a poker hand works when you're trying to figure out all the variables involved. And that's how, trying to figure out why, any life problem is happening. It's just much more complex with people.
Right. That's why the teaching game, to me, is really interesting. Because the game, the way I view teaching is that you need to gather as much information as possible before advising. Although I try not to advise all that often, but gathering information is a very big part of the game. The way I view teaching is like a game.
Yeah.
Which most people don't view it as. It's actually like poker in a sense that there are... Well, I think it's more complex than poker because there are more decision points. Like in a conversation, if you're teaching someone one-on-one.
Well, there's one reason that it's more complex, and that's because there's less rules.
Right.
Poker has rules, therefore it's simpler.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, there's no rules, and there's all these decision points. Poker tells you when the decision points are, flop, turn, river. And so you kind of have to find the decision points on your own when you're teaching. And then the amount of different lines you can take is probably infinite.
Yeah. And the possible outcomes when you take that line.
Right, which further complicates things. Right.
Yeah, I mean, teaching or like just kind of helping further someone's knowledge in general is always like really interesting. I know that being good at something or being successful at something does not come close to like making that person qualified to help someone else to do the same exact thing. And I think that has a lot to do with personality and just the differences between people. It's like it's very easy for the best, the smartest math student to be, way worse at helping someone else to understand math because it becomes so natural for them that they can't contemplate what the other people are having a problem with.
Right. So yeah, I don't think teaching, it's very hard to advise and do a good job at it. And people do it all the time. And I've definitely had my life impacted by people who have advised. I'm sure you have. But
Yeah, I've learned way more from other people than they've learned from me.
right. The main goal the way I view teaching is that advising is a very small percentage of what I do, but if I can help deepen someone's understanding of the situation or of themselves, I've done a pretty damn good job. And
Right.
if I can do that and also increase their kind of curiosity and interest about the subject, then I've done an even better job. And if I'm actually able to give some advice and feel confident about that, then that's like kind of like a bonus, but doesn't happen that often.
Well, I'm sure you're selling yourself short there, but I mean, it's definitely teaching, getting someone to further understand on any single topic is hard enough, but when you're trying to, like, for you, teaching started in poker, correct?
Yeah.
And I mean, even just trying to figure out how someone views the game, what they are missing in your mind, and how to get your train of thought to where they are, and then guide them closer towards where you are is just, I mean, it's a journey.
That's a pretty perfect breakdown of what it is.
Yeah, I mean, like you can beat your head against the wall all day and say like, I'm good at poker. This is why I'm good at poker. But like, if they don't get it, they don't get it. You have to find their path and like connect the two.
So I can do this all day, but let's get into some ending questions and
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
wrap it up. I usually ask about books.
2 hours of overlay.
What's up?
The old 2 hours of overlay.
Right. I usually ask about books, but I forgot about that one. We already talked about that one.
I'll read some books before next podcast.
Right. We could have talked Coelho's book. That's a great one. If you like books like Coelho's, there's a fiction book called Musashi, which is about like this samurai's journey, which is absolutely incredible. I literally didn't work for 3 days just to read this fucking book.
Musashi?
Yeah, really cool story. And yeah, it's kind of like similar in like the hero's journey type story, and has like a lot of interesting stuff on Zen and skill mastery and personal growth and purpose and lots of stuff. And it's just a great story. But anyways, so a question I asked, and it could be obvious stuff. Well, besides like the obvious ones, and the smaller or less obvious, the better. The question is, what do you love?
What do I love? Well, I think it's not obvious, but I think it's obvious to most people, but they would never admit it. Like, not never admit it, but it wouldn't come to mind if they were asked this question necessarily. But I love, satisfaction.
Mm.
Feeling I've accomplished something or like I've done well, you know.
Right.
So obviously that can come in, many forms. The two I would really point to are, or the two ways that I've, gleaned satisfaction the most in my life is usually not personal. Or it has a lot to do with me, in a sense, because, whether it was something I did for, a family member or friend that made them really happy, or something that I did to contribute to a team in sports, since that was such a huge part of my life emotionally growing up. I think those were like the greatest moments. Like when I won um, the two tournaments at Foxwoods, I won one for like 90 and one for 100, or cashed for those amounts at least.
Hmm.
Those were incredibly satisfying to me because I had sold so much of myself to friends.
Hmm.
So like my buddy Sean had 42.5% of the Foxwoods 100K score. So that felt like really cool
Right.
because I was having personal success, but it was directly affecting someone that I care about, more than myself, which is how I view most of my close friends and family. So it was like, it's deep. I mean, it's a really, really good feeling to make someone you care about happy.
That's cool. Yeah, I just really like that question because I just feel like it changes people's mindset just a little bit. Makes them, I don't know, it's
Puts
hard.
them on their toes.
Yeah, I don't know, it's hard to talk about something you love, like the thing you love the most, and not like be in a good mood and not, I don't know, it's just interesting. Um, Other question is morning routine, which I kind of just stole from Tim Ferriss' podcast, but I don't get that interesting answers from it, so I think I might drop it. But I'm gonna give it again one more time.
You're asking a poker player about a morning
Yeah, I
routine?
know, I know,
No
it's
wonder you're not getting interesting answers.
right.
You need to ask him about like the pre-jerk off ritual or something. Usually I wake up in the morning, um, late if I have to be up, and just as I wake up if I don't have to be up. And then I look at my phone and I see what time it is. And I figure that if I'm out of bed within 60 minutes of the time I looked at the phone at first, that's like a win. So I'm not a morning person. So like I have to I look at if it's like 11:30, I'm like, all right, I got this iPad here that I can do all sorts of stuff with. Look up news stories or see what people are posting on Facebook. I'm not attached to my phone or iPad during the day nearly as much as some people, but that first hour of the day is like me just like letting my brain turn on.
Right.
When I'm in a really healthy like ritual, it involves squeezing a couple lemons into some water and drinking that and then going for a little run, but that's not a steadfast part of the ritual at this point.
Right. Are you into meditation? Do you do that?
No, never tried. And honestly, I buy it. Like I buy that it's a good thing for your body, for your mind, and I just can't sit still, man. If I'm awake, I gotta be doing something.
Yeah, you don't have to meditate necessarily. Like sit still to meditate necessarily. Like there's basically anything you try to do with a high level with like complete presence on that thing. So like if you're, I don't know, imagine you had like 100 apples to cut and you, I don't know, you don't need a fucking 100 apples, but if you're just sitting there cutting apples and you're focusing on that whole process and you do that for like 15 minutes and that's your practice, like not that you'd
That's really
want to,
interesting
yeah,
because, like, when I think of meditation, I mean, that's like my nightmare. Like,
right,
people, if anyone's ever like annoyed with me, it's because I'm just constantly talking or moving. Like,
right,
I can't fathom sitting in one place and like trying to shut my mind off. When I try to go to sleep, it takes me hours sometimes. Like,
Right.
I just can't shut my brain off. But
Yeah.
I could probably cut 100 apples.
Right. Well, I mean, there's also walking meditation. Walking meditation's really cool. Like, you could also do running meditation. Like, anything you're doing and trying to have presence on, have presence is kind of mirroring that practice. It's, I don't want to say it's all about, but one of the key things is cultivating presence. And as your mind wanders, like if you're cutting the apples, like your mind's going to wander to, I don't know, your pre-jerk off routine. Like going.
That's the new poker player question.
Right. I'm going to ask it on the next
Yeah,
podcast.
I'm going to listen to the next podcast and I want to hear that question. I, definitely, since I came up with the question, I'm bailing out on being the first to answer.
Right. But yeah,
Gotta hear
if you
some
just
answers.
take your mind, if you bring your mind back to the apples, that's cultivating the ability to have
Interesting.
presence. You are missing out, perhaps, on some of the things, but not necessarily. I'm not even sure, really. I think, yeah, almost anything you do with presence and constantly bringing your mind back to that is what it's like. And that's what sitting meditation is like. You focus on your breath and you bring your mind back to the breath as it wanders. It's the same principle.
I think I could start with yoga. That would be like a baby step for me. I went to one class with Brad and his wife once, and it was interesting. I actually enjoyed it, but
Yeah, yoga and meditation. I think yoga was initially, all right, you could fact check me on this, but I've heard yoga was invented to get the body ready for meditation. And
that makes a lot of sense. I mean, even if yoga specifically is something very, very similar to it, probably was, if it's not.
yep, yeah, I do yoga. I combine yoga with meditation, so they go pretty well. And it's meditative to do yoga while trying to be present. You know, you can focus on how it feels in your muscles and make that your complete focus and turn off your mind. And it's pretty similar.
A lot of pain. I felt a lot of pain when I did yoga.
It's painful, man. I'm not flexible. Not too.
No.
I'm not too into the yogas.
I was not a goalie. I'm not. It was not an enjoyable experience for my body, but it was, you know.
I dig it. All right, dude. Thanks for coming on, man. I had a feeling this was going to be a 3-hour one.
Yeah, yeah. Trying to get me to stop at an hour is pretty impossible.
Right. Yeah, it was really fun. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
No problem, man. I enjoyed the conversation.
All right. Peace, brother.
Take care, man. Best of luck with the kid.